Chapter 862. Sure enough, it's not only the blade of salvation that has the aura of origin, but so does my authority. In fact, Wu Ming had long discovered that his authority had a weak restraining effect on Aziz Dakaha, or rather, the black mud on Aziz Dakaha's body. After all, the 12 avatars were the same as the blade of salvation. They were existences that had been baptized together with Wu Ming in the origin, so they naturally carried the aura of origin. In other words, his authority also had the ability to restrain Aziz Dakaha, although it was very weak. Similarly, the vitality also had a certain recovery effect on the corrosive damage caused by the black mud. So Wu Ming, who previously did not dare to fight Aziz Dakaha in close combat, dared to do so now. However, because the recovery effect was not very optimistic, Wu Ming could not excessively come into close contact with Aziz Dakaha for too long. If he came into contact with him too much, the vitality avatar would lose its effectiveness. However, this power alone was far from enough. Whether it was the Blade of Salvation or the 12 avatars, they contained too little power of origin. Even if Aziz Dakaha was killed in an instant, Aziz Dakaha would be healed by the black mud. In addition, this place had now become Aziz Dakaha's black mud cave. If he did not clean up all the black mud, Aziz Dakaha's injuries caused by origin would completely disappear as soon as he came into contact with the black mud. No, perhaps even injuries not caused by origin would be healed by Aziz Dakaha. For example, right now, although Aziz Dakaha had injured Wu Ming in the previous exchange of blows, he had also been injured by a trace of origin power in Wu Ming's Thunder God avatar. However, a black mud tentacle approached Aziz Dakaha and gently touched him. Aziz Dakaha's injuries were immediately healed, and it was impossible to tell that he was injured at all. From this, it could be seen that Wu Ming was still unable to completely destroy Aziz Dakaha. Without power, you can't do anything to me. You can only be a lowly mouse in my cage, being toyed with by me. Ha ha ha. It was as if he was quite satisfied with Wu Ming's helpless look, but his laughter only added to the despair. Wu Ming wasn't a human. Wu Ming wasn't human. After adjusting his breathing, Wu Ming began to ponder. According to Az Dakaha, it seemed like he had never used his full strength and was only playing with Wu Ming. Wu Ming did not think that Aziz Dakaha was bluffing. Aziz Dakaha had once fought against millions of gods and was not at a disadvantage. Although there were only 3 digits of him, he was no weaker than the 2 digits of humans in the final trial. Just the god spirit level body, created from his blood alone, was enough to make him suffer. By the way, this information was obtained from Galji by Wu Ming's clone. This information was mixed in with the Lune runes from before. Perhaps it was because Aziz Dakaha was covered in black mud, but Wu Ming had never seen Aziz Dakaha use the blood clone technique. However, this technique should be considered passive and could not be used actively. Moreover, Aziz Dakaha's blood had probably been assimilated into the black mud. Did that mean this technique could not be used? Wu Ming was overthinking things. Since the blood had been assimilated by the black mud, didn't that mean the black mud was Aziz Dakaha's blood? Roar! Suddenly, Aziz Dakaha roared. Under Wu Ming's solemn expression, blurry things appeared from the black mud. There was no doubt that these were Aziz Dakaha's clones. Roar, roar, roar. These indistinguishable black clones roared in unison, and then rushed in Wu Ming's direction, or it could be said that they were carried by the black mud and flew over. It seemed that Aziz Dakaha was not prepared to continue playing with Wu Ming. Coincidentally, Wu Ming had the same thought. God says humans are sinful. God says humans need to be purified. Thus, I bestow the flood upon my body. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the people of the world equal relief. Wu Ming slowly chanted the spirit of words until the Az Dakaha clone at the front was extremely close to Wu Ming. The spirit of words had just finished chanting. In an instant, an ocean-like wave surged out of nowhere from Wu Ming's back, washing away all of Aziz Dakaha's doppelgangers and a large amount of black mud. In an instant, the flood erupted. The flood that submerged the entire outer gate of 54,545 caused Aziz Dakaha to raise his height. He was clearly surprised by Wu Ming's move. Without stopping, Wu Ming extended his left hand and continued to chant other spirited words. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. Lord's day, sinners shall be punished. Crush their backs, dig out their bones, hair, and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot approach the darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy thee. The flood changed color and turned black. At the same time, the flood also changed in nature. The black mud was being eroded by the flood that was mixed with twice the original power. It was quite shocking. But just the combination of the flood and annihilation avatars was not enough to have a serious effect on the black mud. And because of the mutual restraint, the black mud was also slowly devouring the black flood that submerged the outer gate of 54,545. I didn't expect you to have such a trump card. Aziz Dakaha praised Wu Ming. Whether it was the flood or annihilation avatars, Aziz Dakaha didn't know about them. Or rather, Wu Ming deliberately didn't use them in order to catch him off guard. But this alone isn't enough. Aziz Dakaha seemed to be mocking Wu Ming. The shadow wings on his back suddenly spread out, and a large amount of black mud seemed to be recreated. It swarmed out from Aziz Dakaha's back and increased the amount of black mud. It also accelerated the rate at which the black mud was eroding the Black Sea. But what surprised Aziz Dakaha even more was what came next. Lightning, lightning, lightning. I am the conqueror who can defeat 1,000 with white, 10,000 with 1,000, and 10,000 with 10,000. Now, for me who stands on the side of justice, please shine brightly and bestow me with divine power. Reaching out his right hand, Wu Ming chanted a new incantation. Countless thunderbolts mixed into the black flood. The black flood with thunderbolts was temporarily on par with the replenished black mud. At this moment, Wu Ming's two outstretched hands suddenly clasped together. I'm the one who will crush all enemies and enmity between humans and demons. Suddenly, Wu Ming adjusted the Thunder God avatar to the maximum output. Suddenly, the area contained by the Black Sea, or rather, the entire outer door of the 54545 division, was filled with thunderbolts. The Black Sea instantly became a sea of thunderbolts. However, the large amount of thunderbolts didn't spread to the surroundings. Instead, they evaporated the entire Black Sea. The entire Black Sea was disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is his brain damaged? Or is it that he didn't control his moves well? Aziz Dakaha mocked Wu Ming's play of his own attack, canceling out his own attack. But then, Aziz Dakaha realized that something was wrong, because his entire black mud den was covered in fog. Chapter 863. What are you trying to do? Aziz Dakaha couldn't help but shout. The black ocean that had been evaporated by the Thunder God's incarnation had now turned into mist and filled the entire black mud cave. Moreover, from the outside, billowing white fog could be seen emerging from the numerous holes in the black mud cave, as if the interior was on fire. The thick fog had indeed attracted the attention of outsiders. What's that? Someone shouted. Some people noticed the mist that was coming out of the cave. Gradually, the large number of community members surrounding the 54545 barrier put down their work one by one and looked at the devil's den that was emitting thick fog. Many brave people flew into the sky, hoping to observe from a closer distance. Smoke? No, it's mist. Mandela rode a flying dragon into the sky. It would be easier to investigate the mist. After checking the defensive grace that he had prepared, Mandela piloted the wyvern in the direction of the fog to begin his investigation. In the sky not far away, White Yiksha was flying toward them. Because they knew the seriousness of the matter, the outer gates around the 54545 outer gate had been controlled by the North District hierarchy and sealed off. As a result, White Yiksha could only move to the nearest outer gate that was sealed off and use his own methods to come over. White Yiksha, who had no convenient method, could only fly over. This power, the thick fog, also attracted White Yiksha, who had just rushed over. This caused White Yiksha, who was about to land, to give up on his plan. Instead, he headed straight for the Devil's Den. Wuming had used Flood in front of White Yiksha. The mist was very similar to Wuming's Flood, or rather, it had the exact same aura. How could it not attract White Yiksha's attention? In the temporary meeting room of the 54545 Outer Gate Alliance, Shadora, who was alone with Vera to discuss the situation, also ran out because of the mist. Vera was the same. "Villo," Vera muttered softly. She jumped and flew up as well. Wait a minute, Master Vera." Shadora immediately followed after seeing this. Just as Shadora and Vera flew into the sky, the White Yiksha, who happened to encounter them, issued a warning. "Don't get too close. I'm afraid the mist is corrosive." White Yiksha had witnessed the might of the outer sex sea of annihilation. Absolute Evil's clone had died without a trace. This fog probably had a similar ability. "Lord White Yiksha, have you arrived?" Shadora was rather surprised to see White Yiksha here. "I just arrived not long ago. When I saw the changes here, I immediately rushed over." White Yiksha nodded at Shadora and Vera. "We rushed over because we saw the changes here," Shadora replied. Then, Shadora looked at the temporary base of the community. Taking a closer look, these communities seemed to be very close to the boundary wall. If the corrosive mist were to spread, it would be terrible. Shadora asked, "Lord White Yiksha, do we need to inform the surrounding communities to retreat?" Although she was in the same class as White Yiksha, compared to White Yiksha, there was nothing wrong with Shadora asking White Yiksha whether it was strength or experience. However, Vera answered Shadora instead of White Yiksha. "This is a gift from the Villo. It has the aura of a Villo." Vera meant that there was no need to retreat. Not only that, but Vera also gave White Yiksha the urge to rush in. "Don't act rashly, Vera." Seeing that Vera had such an impulse, White Yiksha said to Vera. Then, White Yiksha turned to Shadora. "Let's get the others to retreat first. After all, I don't know what's going on inside." "Okay, Lord White Yiksha. I'll inform everyone now." But at this moment, a figure fell from the sky. "That's Big Brother Mandela?" Shadora was shocked. Why did Mandela fall from the sky all of a sudden? Could it be that he was in danger? Although they didn't know what happened to Mandela, White Yiksha and the others wouldn't watch Mandela fall just like that. Swish! Suddenly, White Yiksha shot out at the speed of a rocket, easily rescuing the fallen Mandela and the wyvern carrying Mandela. Vera and Shadora also flew over one after the other. "Big Brother Mandela!" Shadora yelled and flew to White Yiksha's side. White Yiksha held the unconscious wyvern in one hand and the unconscious Mandela in the other. His expression was rather solemn. No matter if it was the wyvern or Mandela's body, or rather, their skin was filled with burn marks. They must have been accidentally corroded by the spreading mist during the investigation. "But don't worry, it's just a severe burn on the skin," White Yiksha said and handed the wyvern and Mandela to Shadora. Perhaps a severe burn on the skin outside the box was a serious injury, but it was only a minor injury inside the box. Moreover, Mandela was a subspecies of the fire dragon and had a certain resistance to fire damage, so Mandela wasn't seriously injured. Shadora, after bringing Mandela back, immediately informed the surrounding communities to retreat by 10 kilometers and pay attention to any changes here. If there's no other way, retreat further. "Yes, Sir White Yiksha." Shadora, who was concerned about her brother, nodded immediately and flew down with Mandela and the wyvern. Then, White Yiksha looked at the mist released by the demon's den and said to Vera, "It can even burn a subspecies of the fire dragon, and it looks like the aftermath." "This mist isn't simple," White Yiksha said. Although she knew that Wuming was powerful, Wuming always brought her new surprises. "The Villo is in danger," Vera said, and was about to barge in again. "Is this really okay?" Perhaps because there were no outsiders, White Yiksha's rather strange words entered Vera's ears. "Although the Villo isn't safe, it isn't dangerous either. I know the guy better than thou. No matter what, White Yiksha had the advantage over Vera in terms of time and understanding. That guy isn't someone who can be defeated easily, even if the opponent is absolute evil. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have been able to create such a huge commotion after fighting with Az Dakaha for a day. Although that was the case, it wasn't a reason to stop Vera. Knowing this, White Yiksha immediately flew in front of Vera and spoke again. Who knows, it might be a crucial moment now. If thou barge in, it might ruin the Villo's plan. Ugh. Vera was instantly embarrassed. It had to be said that this was exactly what Vera wanted. Indeed, after all, Wuming and Az Dakaha had been fighting inside for a day. What if it was a crucial moment now, and Vera suddenly barged in and disrupted it? It's better for us to stay on the periphery and observe the situation. However, at this moment, a heat wave that distorted space shot out from a corner of the demon's den and crashed into the boundary wall, causing a shocking explosion. Chapter 864. The timeline jumped forward a few minutes. The fog created by Wuming's Thunder God avatar had yet to spread outside. A large amount of fog was concentrated in the Devil's Den, which was not very permeable and would not dissipate in a short time. First, the fog corroded the interior of the Devil's Den, and the interior of the Devil's Den was completely filled with black mud. When the fog came into contact with the black mud, there was the sound of something being corroded. The corroded black mud had no choice but to passively endure it because the fog was too small. Unless the black mud filled the entire Devil's Den, it would not be able to do anything. What is this? Az Dakaha recognized the nature of the mist. Az Dakaha was surprised to see the true nature of the fog. It was a black sea of gas molecules, and these molecules carried the power of flood and annihilation. It was this power that was constantly corroding the black mud. However, as these gas molecules corroded the black mud, the fog molecules themselves were also dying. After all, the black mud also had the ability to corrode. When the gas molecules corroded the black mud, they would also be corroded by the black mud. It could be said that even if the black mud could only passively endure it, it would not suffer much. However, these gas molecules were originally sacrificial pawns. Their purpose was to provide cover for Wuming, so it did not matter if they were used up. Since it was to provide cover, Wuming naturally had plans to do something. As an existence with a similar mind, Az Dakaha would not just wait for Wuming to continue. Don't even think about it. No matter what Wuming wanted to do, Az Dakaha would not let Wuming have his way. As he spoke, Az Dakaha opened his mouth. The inside of his mouth was also covered in black mud. It was so dark that no one could tell what it originally looked like. Only his black fangs were as sharp as ever. In this pitch-black mouth, flashes of flames suddenly appeared between the fangs and moved restlessly. In an instant, Wuming, who was hidden in the fog, could clearly feel that the world had begun to shake. Legend had it that the three-headed mystic dragon was a human king who was guided by the evil god of the sect of fire, Ngola Manuel. Before he was defeated, he had destroyed a third of the world. This inheritance that destroyed a third of the world became Az Dakaha's gift in the box court world. It was also known as the strongest gift of the Lightning series, the Kvarina of the Hegemon's Halo. At this moment, the radiance of the Kvarina that Az Dakaha spoke of gradually solidified. During this process, a trace of black aura climbed onto the radiance and dyed the Kvarina black. Without a doubt, it was the source of black mud. No matter what you want to do, I will kill you before you complete it. Az Dakaha was prepared to use the Kvarina mixed with the source of black mud to completely eliminate Wuming. With that, Az Dakaha spat out the Kvarina, which had been strengthened by the black origin soil, towards the ground. An ominous wave of extreme heat shot out from Az Dakaha's mouth. It was a heat that could melt steel in an instant. Then, an extremely strange scene occurred. A heat ray more than 10 meters in diameter shot out from the 3-meter-tall Az Dakaha's mouth. Under Az Dakaha's control, it shot straight towards Wuming's position, or rather, the position before the fog covered Wuming's figure. The fog that came into contact with the heat ray disappeared in an instant, and the fog near the heat ray evaporated completely. In the end, the heat ray hit Wuming's position and caused a violent explosion. Not only that, but the Karina continued to be released. In the end, the black mud cave was penetrated, and the Karina was spat out by Az Dakaha. But at this moment, Wuming's voice entered Az Dakaha's ears. Az Dakaha was sure that Wuming was behind him. In other words, Wuming had dodged Az Dakaha's prize technique. Perhaps it was the interference of the corrosive fog that caused Az Dakaha's perception to drop for a moment, so he didn't notice Wuming's movement. As for Wuming, he had already started chanting the words of the phoenix incarnation when the fog had covered his body. He arrived behind Az Dakaha. However, before Az Dakaha could get angry, a feeling of surprise rushed to his mind. For victory, quickly come before me. Undying sun, please bestow upon me a shining steed. The demonic whisper entered Az Dakaha's ears, and at the same time, Az Dakaha could feel a wave of heat spreading from his back. Immediately after, another sentence of strengthened words came out. Spirited steed, I, the lifeblood of the dragon of origin, bestow the eternal glory. Bring me the shining wheel that symbolizes me. The heat was mixed with the aura of a large amount of origin power. It was certain that Wuming was behind Az Dakaha, and he was very close. But soon after, Az Dakaha had doubts. He couldn't possibly have so much origin power, right? But what was certain was that if Az Dakaha was hit by this move, there was a high possibility that he would be killed, ignoring the rules of the box court. It was a huge crisis, but Az Dakaha wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. If Silent Wonder's attack hit Az Dakaha, then Az Dakaha might be able to insta-kill him. However, at such a close distance, if Silent Wonder was hit by Kvarina's wheel of hegemony, the Kvarina in his mouth, which had yet to be completely extinguished, once again ignited with a black light. Az Dakaha abruptly turned his body and shot it out. A heat ray that was several meters long instantly covered everything in front of Az Dakaha. Although the Kvarina's power and range weren't as strong as before because it wasn't charged, Az Dakaha didn't think that Wuming could withstand this attack. Where are you attacking, Az Dakaha? Wuming's figure appeared as he spoke, and Wuming's current position was right next to the heat ray that hadn't ended yet. Az Dakaha was right. Wuming couldn't withstand the Kvarina mixed with black mud, but if Az Dakaha couldn't hit Wuming, it would be a different matter. It could be said that if Az Dakaha had released the Kvarina, Wuming would have died without a doubt. But Az Dakaha had missed. How is this possible? Az Dakaha's pitch-black pupils dilated a little. Clearly, he didn't believe that he had made a mistake. Chapter 865. At such a close distance, how could the three-headed demonic dragon, Az Dakaha, who was the ultimate evil god of the sect of fire, make a mistake? In Az Dakaha's perception, Wuming was clearly behind him. How could he have shifted his position? How could Az Dakaha's Kvarina just miss Wuming by a hair's breadth? Whoosh! A few gusts of wind blew past Az Dakaha's face. The fog that was slowly dissipating due to the heat rays was also accelerated by the gusts of wind, causing it to dissipate even faster. The multiple layers of wind will refract light. The principle of light refraction was simple. It was nothing more than the refraction of light through different media at different speeds. Az Dakaha's guess was right. Wuming had used the storm incarnation to control the wind, allowing the multiple layers of wind to refract light. This caused Az Dakaha's Kvarina to shift a little bit. As for how to do it, Wuming referred to Altoria's Wind King barrier. As the closest person to Altoria, Wuming was very familiar with everything about Altoria, including the Wind King barrier that Merlin had designed for Altoria to hide Excalibur. Altoria's Wind King barrier was not so much a noble artifact as it was a special magic trick. The principle was simple. It simply used the multiple layers of wind attached to the holy sword to change the refractive index of light to achieve the effect of hiding the sword, preventing the opponent from obtaining information about the weapon. However, the Wind King barrier could only achieve the effect of hiding and not refracting. It could not shift Wu Ming's figure, and it was even more difficult to shift Karina, which was mixed with black origin soil. However, with other assistance, there would be no problem. The fog that filled the Devil's Den was the product of Wu Ming's thunder incarnation to change the form of flood and annihilation. Naturally, it was also Wu Ming's authority. Thus, it was relatively easy to control. The mist itself was a thin layer of water, but Wu Ming's mist was an even thinner existence. As everyone knew, water could be refracted. Fog's refraction effect was weaker than water's, but it could still do the same. Whether it was the fog that seemed to be blown away when Aziz Dakaha used Farina, or the fog that combined with wind to shift Wu Ming's position, it was all done by Wu Ming. However, a simple refraction of light could not make Aziz Dakaha fall for Wu Ming's trick. Putting aside Aziz Dakaha's 3-digit strength, Aziz Dakaha was also considered a wise man. He was not stupid to that extent. Therefore, relying only on storm, flood, and annihilation was still insufficient. In the end, Wu Ming activated the rarely used magician incarnation. When the magician incarnation that could perform the miracles of the gods, the storm incarnation that brought with it multiple layers of wind, and the flood incarnation and the annihilation incarnation that were affected by the thunder god incarnation, the combination of these three brought about a trick that fooled Aziz Dakaha. The wind covered Wu Ming's figure, and the fog refracted Wu Ming's figure. The god's miracle transformed the two into something that could even deceive the evil god, the ultimate illusion. As Wu Ming spoke, he raised his head and looked at Aziz Dakaha with a pair of golden eyes. Wu Ming was not good at illusions, but that did not mean he did not know how to use them. Back in Britain, Wu Ming was influenced by Merlin's powerful illusions. He had a lot of experience in illusions, and today, it came in handy. Although Wu Ming did not put much effort into illusions, but with the combination of multiple powers, he finally achieved an ultimate illusion that could even deceive the gods. Aziz Dakaha's mistake was the best proof of Wu Ming's illusion. Just a trick to fool people. How dare you keep me in the dark? Aziz Dakaha was enraged. If Wu Ming could defeat him in a head-on battle, he would be convinced and would not be angry. After all, Wu Ming was the root dragon. Even if he was defeated by Wu Ming, there was nothing to be ashamed of. But Wu Ming had used a trick like illusions to get behind him. Putting aside the issue of identity, Aziz Dakaha was a 3-headed demonic dragon who had mastered thousands of magic spells. It was a great humiliation that he was blinded by illusions. However, Aziz Dakaha did not need to worry about anger. He had no time to dodge. What he needed to think about now was how to deal with Wu Ming's sun that had been compressed to the size of a palm and was about to explode. The heat that he had sensed at the beginning was coming from this sun. Checkmate, Aziz Dakaha. With Wu Ming's smile, Aziz Dakaha was covered in the light of the sun. Outside the Devil's Den, the members of the community who had formed an alliance around the realm wall were terrified. After Shadora conveyed White Yiksha's instructions, they began to retreat. The huge heat ray that had pierced through the Devil's Den had destroyed a large piece of the realm wall. The aftermath of the explosion had affected many people. Although no one was killed, many were injured. Although the realm wall was not so strong that nothing could destroy it, it was not so easily destroyed. As a huge barrier that divided the community, the quality of the realm wall was naturally guaranteed. Not to mention, there was the existence of the realm gate on the realm wall, which increased the quality of the realm wall to another level. However, it was the strange heat ray that had shot out from the Devil's Den that had easily destroyed the realm wall. However, they could not be sure who had launched the attack just now. Was it absolute evil? Or was it a hero who was fighting absolute evil? However, they could be sure that it was absolute evil or the hero who was fighting absolute evil. No matter who had launched the terrifying attack just now, the other person who could fight with the opponent for a day could be said to be a formidable expert. If these people had only taken the incident of the 5-4-5-4-5 outer gate being submerged in black mud seriously before, they were now terrified. This was also why they had started to retreat without hesitation when they learned that White Yiksha had signaled for everyone to retreat. After all, this was something that could not be helped. A member of the community in the retreating team would occasionally look at the pitch-black devil's den behind them. If there was another heat ray like the one just now and it hit them, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was better to retreat for a while first. Then, he looked at White Yiksha and Vera who were floating in the sky and sighed in relief. Now, the ruler of the East Burrow, White Yiksha, and the most powerful demon in the North Burrow, Vera, were covering for their retreat. Even if there was another attack like the one just now, there was nothing to be afraid of. Reality proved that this person was overthinking. White Yiksha and Vera were indeed covering for their retreat, but the two of them still had lingering fears from the attack just now. That was absolute evil's move. Chapter 866. White Yiksha's expression was extremely serious. He was absolutely certain that it was absolute evil Azidakaha's move. The strongest gift of the flash element, Karina, was formed from the inheritance that destroyed 1/3 of the world. Villa will be fine. Although Vera comforted herself, she was still worried about Wuming. Since Vera was already like this, White Yiksha was naturally not any better. Even if she retrieved the spirit core, she might not be able to deal with absolute evil. If it's really the end. However, before White Yiksha could finish speaking, the entire devil's den instantly turned red as if it was burning from the inside. Sensing the danger, White Yiksha immediately retreated. Then, a blazing pillar of fire shot up into the sky. The entire sky was dyed red, and space began to distort from the heat of the pillar of fire. This is the flames of the sun. White Yiksha raised a hand and covered half of his face. The eruption of the pillar of fire caused a violent gale. The gale seemed to be blowing away the air, sweeping away some of the surrounding teams that had yet to completely retreat. Everyone felt suffocated for more than 10 seconds. After withstanding the strong wind with great difficulty, what came next was the extreme heat. The realm wall began to slowly melt, and part of the land outside the realm wall directly turned into magma. Among the Alliance members who had yet to completely retreat, many things, such as tents, paper, and human hair, were directly ignited by the heat of the pillar of fire. Even many people's clothes were burning. Even Shadora and the others with the Fire Dragon bloodline could not withstand the heat. The sweat that they had just excreted immediately evaporated, and their bodies also felt a severe lack of water. Some ordinary people did not even sweat and directly fainted. Some special races were also affected. For example, the body of Aisha Ignifartes, who came to volunteer as support, even fluctuated as if she was about to die. Jack was so scared that he immediately used his body to protect Aisha. It could be said that if White Yiksha had not asked the Alliance members to start retreating, many people would have directly evaporated because of the pillar of fire that pierced through the entire black mud Denver. After all, the black mud cave covered the entire outer sect of the 5-4-5-4-5. Although it was inconceivable, the fire pillars also covered the entire outer sect of the 5-4-5-4-5. At such a close distance, White Yiksha could completely determine that the fire pillar in front of him had such an ability. Immediately following that, White Yiksha's expression changed because she realized that the pillar of fire had no intention of stopping. It was even accelerating the pillar of fire towards the sky. Not good. Seeing this scene, White Yiksha turned pale with fright. If a pillar of fire with such a range and power rushed into the sky, it would definitely smash a huge hole in the sky surrounding the box court. It might even affect a very large area of the box court curtain. This would definitely have a very serious impact on the box court. At that time, something would definitely happen to some of the races protected by the box curtain. For example, the vampires, who couldn't face the sun directly, would suddenly burn to death under the dangerous sunlight. However, someone was a step faster than White Yiksha. Swish! Vera rushed into the sky at an extremely fast speed like a hot knife through butter. It looked like Vera was prepared to block the powerful pillar of fire that rose from the ground by herself. Vera! White Yiksha cursed inwardly and immediately flew up. This pillar of fire was no trivial matter. Ignoring the range of effects, its power wasn't something that could be casually blocked. But so what? Didn't she need to block it if she couldn't block it? The answer was naturally no. White Yiksha was only complaining that Vera was prepared to take the risk alone. There was no other meaning. Therefore, White Yiksha immediately caught up to Vera. Vera, look at how quiet you are. Why are you always so impulsive? White Yiksha said to Vera as he flew at top speed. Because they will be in danger, Vera simply replied. Was it because she was a child of the community? White Yiksha glanced at the tiny people on the ground. Although direct sunlight was harmful to ghosts, it wasn't fatal. Vera didn't have to be so anxious, right? If Vera was really so responsible, the position of the North District's ruler would have been hers long ago. There must be other reasons. There's a Villo's aura in the pillar of fire. I had to help him resolve it before he makes a mistake. Vera meant that the Villo was the one who set the fire. As expected, it was for Wuming. White Yiksha immediately made a helpless expression. No matter what, this pillar of fire can't shatter the curtains of the box court. Otherwise, it will be troublesome. White Yiksha corrected his expression. I don't have any defense-type gifts. It's too late to summon astral beasts. Vera, do you have any good ideas? To be honest, if you asked White Yiksha to destroy a city and commit murder and arson, she wouldn't have any problems. However, when it came to protection and defense, she really had shortcomings. Furthermore, she had yet to retrieve her spirit core, so she was even more of a dabbler. White Yiksha had also exposed this shortcoming during the Absolute Evil clone surprise attack. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on White Yiksha. Everyone had their shortcomings. Furthermore, who asked White Yiksha to encounter such perverted crises time and time again? To deal with the doppelgangers of absolute evil, not to mention White Yiksha herself. Even her sworn enemy would have to put in some effort to annihilate all of them. Of course, if White Yiksha could retrieve the spirit core, she could also do it. If it was a normal attack, White Yiksha would naturally be able to defend against it. However, the Pillar of Fire this time was clearly not a normal attack. It looked like a fatal blow that Wuming had delivered to AZ Dakaha. Regardless of whether AZ Dakaha could block it, she, White Yiksha, had no way of blocking it for a while. Realm Gate. No. Vera's first thought was to use the Realm Gate to move the Pillar of Fire away. However, there was another Realm Gate on the other side of the Realm Gate that might affect others. If it doesn't work, I can only release an equally powerful attack from the opposite direction to cancel out. Although this method would cause a vertical explosion in the end, it might. No, looking at the range of the Pillar of Fire, the explosion would definitely affect some of the surrounding outer buildings. However, it was still much better than the curtain of the box being broken. In that case, I'll use the power of death to eliminate it. As a great devil born between life and death, Vera naturally controlled the power of death. Moreover, this would not cause an explosion. Vera's expression froze. She increased her flying speed and rushed directly to the top of the Pillar of Fire. Vera waved her hand. A large amount of black death energy filled Vera's surroundings and collided directly with the Pillar of Fire. It had to be said that this was effective. However, the range was too small. This Pillar of Fire affected 54,545 outer buildings. Vera could not completely block it. Leave the rest to me. White Yiksha also increased her speed. She was even faster than Vera just now. After all, White Yiksha was once the White Knight King. Vera had blocked many pillars of fire. She had to block the fish that escaped the net no matter what. At this moment, the Pillar of Fire suddenly decreased its speed. Furthermore, it was slowly disappearing. This, if one were to ask White Yiksha when she was the most aggrieved, she would definitely answer that there was no time more aggrieved than now. Chapter 867. When Wuming released the sun, he chanted 2 lines of incantations in a row, which made this sun incarnation double in strength. Not only that, when Wuming used storm, annihilation, flood, thunder god, phoenix, sun, and magician, the power of the 7 incarnations accumulated was all stuffed into the sun incarnation by Wuming. This not only increased the sun to the point where it could cause fatal damage to Aziz Dakaha, but also increased the range of the sun incarnation to the extreme. Moreover, the black mud was simply the best fuel for the fire of the sun that was mixed with the power of the source. Therefore, it was precisely because of this, as well as the support of the power of the source, that the pillar of fire that broke out from the black mud cave could spread throughout the entire outer sect of the 54545, burning the black mud of the outer sect of the 54545 to nothing. However, Wuming was not a reckless person. After the explosion, the pillar of fire formed by the flames was released towards the sky. This was done by Wuming to prevent the explosion from spreading to the people or things nearby. It could be said that if Wuming allowed the sun to explode at will, then even if the people of the Alliance retreated to a certain distance, they would still be directly vaporized. After all, this was the fire of the sun that burned the entire outer sect of the 54545, and more importantly, the surrounding outer sect might also be affected by the flames. However, if the pillar of fire were to explode towards the sky, it would not spread to the people or things around. But if the pillar of fire were to be allowed to soar into the sky, the curtain of the box would definitely be shattered. Therefore, Wuming added the power of annihilation to the sun. When the sun erupted to a certain extent, annihilation would be activated and cut the pillar of fire in the middle. As everyone knew, the pillar of fire was not a pillar, but a pillar-like object formed by the continuous eruption of flames. If it was cut in the middle, the first half of the pillar of fire would dissipate, and the remaining power of the second half of the pillar of fire would not be enough to pierce through the curtain of the box. It would not even reach that height. Wuming used this to prevent the pillar of fire from piercing through the curtain of the box. Moreover, there was a long distance between the curtains of the box and the ground, which allowed the pillar of fire to erupt for some distance. Once the fire had weakened, annihilation, which had finished its countdown, would cut off the pillar of fire. After all, if he used annihilation to annihilate the pillar of fire from the beginning, it was likely that it would not succeed. After all, the power of sun at this moment was far greater than the power of annihilation. He could only wait for the pillar of fire to weaken before cutting it in the middle to achieve the desired effect. It turned out that Wuming was right. After the pillar of fire was cut in the middle, the first half quickly dissipated, and the remaining half of the pillar of fire began to slowly dissipate due to the lack of momentum. Although White Yiksha and Vera didn't know what had happened, they were certain that it was Wuming's doing. He didn't need anyone to clean up his mess for him. He could handle alone. What a headache. I got a big fright. White Yiksha sighed helplessly, as if he was relieved of his burden. It could be said that Wuming had once again refreshed White Yiksha's worldview. In short, the crisis of the box's curtain shattering had been resolved. However, this crisis was really child's play compared to the crisis of absolute evil. I wonder how absolute evil is doing. With this in mind, White Yiksha looked down. She wanted to see how absolute evil was doing. Clouds floated around White Yiksha, and at the same time, there were many white clouds that blocked White Yiksha's line of sight. It was obvious how high her current position was. If she was outside the box, it would be a life-threatening height for ordinary humans, but it wasn't considered high in the world of the box. It wasn't considered high for White Yiksha either. With White Yiksha's powerful eyesight, she could still see the ground clearly. Although she couldn't see everything clearly, it was almost there. The entire outer gate of the 54545 division had completely sunk into a basin-like structure because this part of the land had completely evaporated. However, at this moment, the basin was not completely dry. Instead, it was filled with red magma. This magma was formed from the magma that had not directly evaporated. It filled the entire basin the size of the 54545 outer gate. Even the realm wall surrounding the outer door of 54,545 had stopped melting after half of it had melted because of the dissipation of the fire pillar. This extraordinary sun flame is actually able to easily melt the barrier of cultivation. If White Yiksha retrieved the spirit spark to recover her strength, she could also use the power of the sun to melt the realm wall, but she couldn't melt the realm wall so quickly. It was still the same sentence. As a separation area, the realm wall that carried the realm door wasn't easily destroyed. Only Az Dakaha, who had fused with the black soil, and Wuming, who had the power of origin, could destroy the realm wall so easily. White Yiksha didn't know much about absolute evil, but she had been in contact with Wuming for so long, but she never expected Wuming to have such strength. White Yiksha was now more and more interested in Wuming's identity. Vera, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said and flew straight down. Vera's figure blew away the clouds, allowing White Yiksha to see the full picture of the ground. White Yiksha focused her eyes. It seemed like there was someone in the magma. Although she couldn't see clearly in the magma, it should be Wuming if nothing unexpected happened. What about absolute evil? White Yiksha suddenly realized this problem. With a trace of worry, White Yiksha suddenly swooped down and followed Vera. The person in the magma was indeed Wuming, but he was motionless at this moment. Other than his shoulders and head floating above the magma, the rest of his body was soaked in the magma. Moreover, a large number of cracks had appeared all over Wuming's body. Specks of blue magic power particles were emitted from the cracks, and he allowed the magma to cause secondary damage to the spirit base. His current appearance was not caused by the explosion of the sun incarnation, but the collapse of the spirit base due to overload. Before, he forcibly used 7 incarnations at the same time, and several of them were directly at the maximum output. Although this spirit base was adjusted to the top of the servant spirit base by Wuming, it still couldn't withstand the use of 7 incarnations at the same time. If it's the original body, it should be no problem at all, Wuming said weakly. If it was the original body, let alone 7 incarnations at the same time, even 12 incarnations at the same time wouldn't be a problem. Wuming had a deep understanding of the strength of his body. Although he was trying to be brave by using his incarnation on this spirit base, he had now achieved his goal. Wuming under the magma couldn't help but clench his hand. Suddenly, a sweet voice came from the sky into Wuming's ears. Villo. Wuming subconsciously looked up. It turned out to be Vera. Are you okay, Villo? Flying above the magma, Vera looked at Wuming, who was soaked in the magma, and felt a little distressed. It's all my fault. I'm sorry. Vera apologized to Wuming with shame. If Wuming didn't help her deal with Maxwell, this wouldn't have happened. However, Wuming shook his head. Don't blame yourself, Vera. Nothing happened to me. Or rather, it was as Wuming wished. As for why, at this moment, White Yiksha also came above the magma and asked Wuming nervously, Villo, where is absolute evil now? As if responding to White Yiksha's words, there was a surge under the magma at this moment. Chapter 868. The reason why White Yiksha asked Wuming about Azidaka's whereabouts was because he knew that absolute evil could not be killed. Or rather, absolute evil could not be killed by Wuming, who was not human. The final trial of humans could only be passed by humans. Even if they really had the strength to crush absolute evil and kill it, absolute evil would revive again. That was the rule of the box court. White Yiksha did not know that Wuming could ignore the rules of the box court and kill absolute evil. That was why he was so anxious. After all, if absolute evil was still alive, then it must be like Wuming staying in this magma lake. That was indeed the case. The entire magma lake began to fluctuate bit by bit as if something was about to be released. Slowly, the entire magma lake began to shake violently. So it's still alive. Wuming, on the other hand, had an as-expected expression. It seemed like he knew that Azidakaha had not been killed by him. After all, absolute evil can only be passed by humans. As a spirit, you naturally can't kill absolute evil. As White Yiksha spoke, he slowly landed beside Wuming and prepared to pull him up and take him away. Because it seemed like absolute evil would not immediately appear from the magma lake, they still had time to retreat. Vera also came to Wuming's other side and prepared to cooperate with White Yiksha to rescue Wuming from the magma lake. Don't worry about me. This body is about to shatter. Leave first. Wuming shook his head and rejected their help. But my community also has a way to heal a spirit's body, Vera said pitifully. Vera did not want Wuming to leave just like that. If a hero who stopped absolute evil is sacrificed like this, it will be a huge blow to our morale, White Yiksha added. Moreover, the Alliance had already suffered a large number of casualties because of the fire pillars created by Wuming. If their morale dropped further, they would be completely finished. Wuming could not help but smile, then shook his head. I have no intention of sacrificing myself. Trust me. Although Wuming's tone was as weak as if he was about to pass away, his eyes were still full of vigor, and even a little happy. White Yiksha and Vera were rather puzzled. They looked at each other, attempting to find out what Wuming was talking about from each other. However, neither of them understood what Wuming meant. Do you guys believe me? If you do, then leave this place for now. Absolute evil will definitely fall into my hands today. Vera trusted Wuming unconditionally, but not White Yiksha. It wasn't that he didn't trust him, but that he didn't dare to take the risk. Wuming looked like he was seriously injured. If absolute evil killed Wuming, it would not only be a matter of morale, but there would also be no one here who could restrain absolute evil. Therefore, White Yiksha felt that it was best to retreat first. Otherwise, she could return the divine spark, retrieve the spirit core, and recover her former strength. In the worst-case scenario, White Yiksha could still use his final ability. Let me retrieve the spirit core. There's no need. Wuming instantly interrupted White Yiksha. Didn't I say that as long as I'm here, you just have to stay in the lower level? Although Wuming did not know if White Yiksha had any means to deal with Az Dakaha, White Yiksha's expression just now was more like she wanted to perish together with Az Dakaha. After all, White Yiksha was Wuming's friend. If it was someone else who wanted to perish together with absolute evil, Wuming might hesitate. But if it was a friend he knew who wanted to perish together with the enemy, Wuming would definitely be the first to object. Vera floated aside a loss and did not speak. She just quietly watched the two of them talk. However, because the magma lake was shaking more and more violently, Vera also showed a hint of anxiety. White Yiksha, who also noticed this, was silent for a few seconds before finally sighing helplessly. Are you really okay with this? White Yiksha looked at Wuming's eyes very seriously. Wuming also responded with seriousness. Trust me. In the end, White Yiksha compromised and retreated with Vera. After White Yiksha and Vera retreated, Wuming looked at the magma lake that was becoming more and more agitated. Wuming had indeed expected Az Dakaha to still be alive, but it was not because White Yiksha said that the final trial of humans had to be completed by humans. After all, Wuming himself was a bug and did not need to care about the rules of the box court. Wuming knew that Az Dakaha was still alive, mainly because of the information provided by Galgi. Galgi had said that to kill absolute evil, one had to solve the bestowal contest of the human's final trial. Furthermore, one had to break Az Dakaha's shoulders, head, and heart at the same time before killing him. However, because of the black mud at the root, Wuming considered these weaknesses useless. Wuming's clone had obtained more information about Az Dakaha from Galgi in the nasalic space. Wuming had also asked Galgi about the universe-like power that had instantly killed one of his clones. Wuming also told Galgi that Galgi had killed one of his clones. Galgi was not surprised, perhaps because he had more or less guessed it. However, most importantly, Wuming already knew what the another cosmology was. According to Galgi, Az Dakaha's another cosmology was called Avesta. Of course, the name was not important. What was important was the ability of Avesta to imitate the opposite of Az Dakaha's own cosmology of Zoroastrianism and the cosmology of mankind that had to be crossed over. It could be used by Az Dakaha in a limited manner and could be used to counteract the gift of the enemy. To put it simply, Az-Dakaha's another cosmology allowed him to simulate the blessings of the enemy and use the enemy's blessings to offset the enemy's blessings. It could be said that the more enemies Az-Dakaha had, the more he could imitate and the stronger he would become. Moreover, as long as it was not the Zoroastrian or human cosmology, Az-Dakaha would not be injured or even killed after activating Avesta. The gods of the Zoroastrian sect could not kill absolute evil, and humans lack power. Other races, such as gods and astrals, could not pose a threat to Az-Dakaha after activating Avesta. Az-Dakaha didn't even put a 3-digit number of enemies in his eyes. As for 2-digit numbers, he could only look at them in his eyes. Therefore, Az-Dakaha was known as one of the strongest god-slayers. Wu Ming felt that it was not an exaggeration to call him one of the strongest in the box. This was also one of the important reasons why White Yiksha felt that Wu Ming could not kill absolute evil. Chapter 869. Wu Ming was neither a fire worship sect deity nor a human. As long as Az-Dakaha had the simulated cosmic atlas, it was impossible for Wu Ming to hurt or even defeat him. Wu Ming could ignore the rules of the box and kill Az-Dakaha. If the sun, which had condensed the power of 7 avatars, hit the defenseless Az-Dakaha, he could definitely kill him. However, Az-Dakaha had the simulated cosmic atlas. If Az-Dakaha had used the power of the simulated cosmic atlas, he might have been able to survive. Perhaps it was a trump card, but Az-Dakaha had never used it. If there was a crisis, Az-Dakaha would definitely use it. And this so-called crisis was just like what happened just now. Not to mention, after fusing with the origin black mud, Az-Dakaha's another cosmology might have undergone some changes. Therefore, Wu Ming knew that he could not kill Az-Dakaha. In other words, Wu Ming's goal from the beginning was not to kill Az-Dakaha, but something else. With that thought in mind, Wu Ming looked at the large whirlpool that had appeared on the magma lake. It was almost time for Az-Dakaha to appear. Walala, like a carp leaping out of the water, Az-Dakaha broke through the magma and flew into the sky. At this moment, Az-Dakaha was still covered in black mud, but the amount of black mud seemed to be much thinner than before. Az-Dakaha's heart seemed to have become transparent. The huge heart kept beating, but other than that, it did not look like he had been soaked in magma, nor did it look like he had been hit by Wu Ming's sun avatar. But Az-Dakaha knew very well that he was almost killed. If he hadn't activated the another cosmology simulation in time, he wouldn't have been able to save himself. I have to say, my old enemy, I have underestimated you. So then, Az-Dakaha opened his mouth again, and the black light began to condense. This was the sign of the Kvarina. I have decided to kill you here and now. In the face of the Kvarina, which was right in front of him, Wu Ming did not show the slightest hint of panic. You can't do it, Az-Dakaha. Although his voice was weak, Wu Ming had a smile on his face. He did not look like he was about to be killed. Then come and try. The black light in Az-Dakaha's mouth became more solid, and it looked like it was about to explode. Even now, you still haven't noticed? Your heart. Wu Ming couldn't help but sigh. His sigh wasn't for anything else, but for the fact that Az-Dakaha hadn't discovered something yet. Az-Dakaha thought that Wu Ming was talking about his heart being exposed, but Az-Dakaha did not take it seriously. It's just my heart that's broken. The rule that you have to break my head, shoulders, and heart to kill me is no longer effective against me with power. Wu Ming was right. The rule was indeed ineffective against Az-Dakaha. So what if the rule is still there? You have to know that you are about to be killed by me. This time, Wu Ming did not care. Is that so? Don't you notice that something is missing? Az-Dakaha was stunned. What? After being reminded by Wu Ming, Az-Dakaha realized what he had lost. Die. Without another word, the enraged Az-Dakaha spat out the Kvarina that had fully materialized from his mouth. The black light of destruction covered Wu Ming and gradually covered the magma lake in a semicircular shape. It began to spread to the entire 5-4-5-4-5 outer gate. A large number of people in the Alliance army who were affected by Wu Ming's sun pillar of fire fell unconscious. The rest of the people were relieved because of the disappearance of the pillar of fire, but the black light that followed made the people in the Alliance army who had not yet fallen unconscious suck in a breath of cold air again. They had not even seen the face of absolute evil, and they had been almost wiped out by the aftermath of one after another. In any case, after this battle, after experiencing the disaster of absolute evil and the hero fighting against absolute evil, the aftermath of the battle between the two, for these people, this was definitely an indelible memory full of memories. The same was true for White Yiksha. Let alone experiencing it, she could not even see a battle of this level. Was it this time? White Yiksha felt helpless about the black light that gradually covered the entire magma lake. Do you have to attack with such a large range every time? However, White Yiksha also gave up. Anyway, the entire 54,545 outer gate had been reduced to a battlefield, and it was almost destroyed. As long as the remaining people did not have any accidents, it would be fine. But Vera, who was with White Yiksha, muttered Wu Ming's name and looked at the spreading black light. Wu Ming was in the semicircular black light at the moment. Although White Yiksha also believed in Wu Ming, she still could not help but worry. I hope nothing happens. At this point, she could only choose to believe in Wu Ming. White Yiksha now regretted that she had promised Wu Ming not to take back the spirit, but just in case, she still had to prepare. If this black light continued to spread, then she would have to use her own strength. But Wu Ming was right. She just needed to believe in him. The black light seemed to be stuck and suddenly stopped spreading. Then, the black light began to shrink bit by bit. Villow's methods. White Yiksha heaved a sigh of relief. At least Wu Ming did not want them to see that he was about to die. The people from the Alliance also heaved a sigh of relief. After all, the danger was temporarily resolved, which meant that they could live a little longer. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the people from the Alliance sped up their retreat. As long as there were no major injuries, they carried the injured and ran. You bastards, slow down. Although Mandela had already woken up, his body was still very weak. At this moment, he was being carried away by a few members of Salamandra. Coincidentally, these people were Mandela's trusted aides in Salamandra. But because of the bumpy ride, Mandela's entire body was in pain. I'm fine. Put me down. Where's Shadora? She's the most important person in Salamandra. Although Mandela was burned unconscious by Wu Ming's mist, it was not to the extent that he could not walk on the ground. But at this moment, his hands and feet were held by these trusted aides, and he could not use his strength at all. He could only scold these people and ask them to put him down quickly. However, Mandela's scolding was incredible. His trusted aides used all their strength and sped up their retreat. Sir Mandela, we can't slow down. After all, we still don't know if there will be danger later. Yes, Sir Mandela. We were appointed by Lady Shadora to take care of you. Your life is the most important thing to us. Lady Shadora still has other companions by her side. Our mission is to escort Sir Mandela to his safe place. You better not talk, Mandela. Be careful not to bite your tongue in the wind. As they spoke, they sped up their legs again. Some of them had even started using the blessing of acceleration. As a result, Mandela was jolted even more severely, to the point where he could no longer speak. At this moment, Mandela could only let out meaningless roars. However, when his trusted aides heard this roar, they thought that Mandela's old injury had relapsed and sped up again. They thought that when they reached a safe place, they could rest assured and find a doctor to treat Sir Mandela. They completely ignored Mandela's murderous gaze. How sad. Chapter 870. In the Magma Lake, where Wu Ming and Aziz Dakaha were located. Aziz Dakaha was forced to freeze. Golden chains extended from the lava lake and wrapped around Aziz Dakaha's body, locking him tightly in the air. However, The chains did not lock him in from all directions. Although it was strange, Az Dakaha could not move. At the same time, the Karina of the hegemon was also locked by Aziz Dakaha. This is, even though Az Dakaha was immobilized by the golden chains, he could still speak. My Karina, in his free time, Aziz Dakar still had the time to marvel at the disappearance of his gift. At this moment, Wu Ming's voice entered Az Dakaha's ears. What a pity, Az Dakaha. Az Dakaha looked down. Wu Ming was still soaked in the lava lake, but the cracks on Wu Ming's body were getting bigger. It looked like he was about to disappear. Is this the power of the origin power? It is indeed powerful, ha ha. Az Dakaha was not depressed about being captured. Instead, he laughed loudly. There is no choice. If you could realize that everything I did was for my body, you would not have lost. Az Dakaha was one of the strongest people in the box court. Moreover, he had the origin black soil. Az Dakaha had the ability to stop Wu Ming from finding his body. That's right. Wu Ming's goal from the very beginning was to find his body. Wu Ming did not want to cause trouble for Az Dakaha. He only wanted to find his body after saving Shadora. In the end, Az Dakaha attacked Wu Ming. Wu Ming and Az Dakaha fought for a day in the Devil's Den just to find out if Wu Ming's body was in Az Dakaha's body. After confirming that his body was hidden in the form of a ball of light in Az Dakaha's heart, Wu Ming began his plan. He used the fog to cover himself and approached Az Dakaha at lightning speed. He used a power that even his spirit base could not withstand to attack Az Dakaha. He wanted to break open the black soil around Az Dakaha's heart and reveal his heart. Once it was revealed, everything would be easy. An extremely close distance, Wu Ming and his body would form a connection. Wu Ming's consciousness would then be able to return to his body. The moment he returned to his body, Wu Ming felt that his injuries had healed. The black soil was also expelled from his body. Coincidentally, Wu Ming's origin power of the Sun Avatar had the power of the origin power of the 7 avatars. The last trace of the black soil was removed from his body. As a result, Wu Ming was completely liberated. A voice that could not be understood by the box court world sounded from the lava lake. Although it could not be understood, the voice had a strong, penetrating power. Not only did the people around the 54,545 outer gate hear it, but the entire North District, the entire box court, from the no-name to the upper levels of the box court. It could be said that everyone in the box court heard it. The experts hidden in the box, such as the 3 digits and even the rare 2 digits, all looked in a certain direction. That direction was the place where the voice came from, the North District's middle outer door of the 54545. Anyone who heard the voice could understand that a powerful existence that they could not afford to offend had come to the box. In the middle of the lava lake of the outer door of the 54545, a huge white figure slowly rose from the lava lake. It was a huge dragon, a dragon that could cover the entire outer door of the 54545. Because of its huge size, this figure only revealed its head, shoulders, and some of its claws. At this moment, Wu Ming was sitting on the dragon's head, paralyzed. To be honest, after my body was affected by the black mud, it unexpectedly grew a step further. Wu Ming said as he touched his head. The dragon, on the other hand, had some strange feelings. After all, the dragon was Wu Ming. Another him touching his own head was very strange. Wu Ming had already mastered the ability to control 2 bodies with 1 consciousness. After his consciousness entered the main body, the originally abandoned spirit base was once again used by Wu Ming. However, it was about time for this spirit base to be used. Bang! Like glass shattering, Wu Ming on the dragon's head instantly shattered, turning into little magic particles and returning to the world. Now it was time to deal with the problem of Az Dakaha. I have to say, Az Dakaha, you are the second strongest person I have ever met, but in the end, you will still be defeated by me. The dragon spoke slowly. Unlike Wu Ming's youthful voice in the spirit-based state, the dragon's voice sounded somewhat ancient. However, this was his real body, which gave Wu Ming a strong sense of belonging. At the same time, Wu Ming raised his dragon claw. Countless golden chains wrapped around the dragon claw, extending down to the bottom of the magma lake and wrapping around Aziz Dakaha's claws. That's right, this was the one that had entangled Aziz Dakaha, Wu Ming's Heaven's Lock, Enkidu, the one that had not evolved before the root had obtained it. The 5 fingers of the dragon claw moved slightly, and Aziz Dakaha, who was bound by the Heaven Lock, could not help but descend and was about to land on the dragon claw. However, Aziz Dakaha wasn't going to give up so easily. Activate Avesta. Counteracted in turn, simulate in another cosmology. In an instant, Aziz Dakaha once again activated the simulated universe in an attempt to break free from Wu Ming's control. However, there was a flash of light, and 4 or 5 golden swords instantly pierced Aziz Dakaha's body. The simulated universe that had just been activated immediately lost its effect. As for Aziz Dakaha's other blessings, they were all sealed by the strengthened golden sword. By the way, as soon as Wu Ming's consciousness returned to his body, he activated a total of 12 avatars. What's this? Aziz Dakaha exclaimed in surprise. The golden sword that split the godhead, one of Welaslana's 10 avatars. If one were to say that Velaslana's authority was fused with Meckel's authority and was modified by Wu Ming to suit himself, then the golden sword was the only authority that could still see the shadow of Velaslana's authority. It was no wonder that Aziz Dakaha was so shocked. He now realized that many of the abilities that Wu Ming used were similar to Welaslana's avatars. When I killed Welaslana in the other world, I obtained his authority. After fusing and modifying it, it has now become my one and only authority, Wu Ming explained casually. To think that I would lose to the same move again. This is fate. Aziz Dakaha chuckled quietly. However, Aziz Dakaha still had some tricks up his sleeve. Pucci, Aziz Dakaha's blood vessels seemed to have exploded, and black liquid began to flow out of his body. It was the source of the black mud. Wu Ming's son had removed the black mud from Wu Ming's body, but Wu Ming did not remove the black mud from Aziz Dakaha's body, so Aziz Dakaha still had the power of the black mud. However, this was also Aziz Dakaha's biggest failure, because mutual restraint means that I can deal more damage to the creature that is possessed by the black mud, Aziz Dakaha. Chapter 871. Wu Ming's formless power of origin continued to flow from his body to his dragon claw. Countless white flames were born. This was the fire of origin produced when the concentration of power of origin reached its peak. It could cause obvious damage to the black mud. The black mud gushing out of Aziz Dakaha's body seemed to have met its natural enemy. It was constantly being burned by the flames, and as the black mud erupted from time to time, the flames would also burn fiercely from time to time, increasing the efficiency of the flames. But no matter what, the result would not change. The black mud gushing out of Aziz Dakaha's body would inevitably be burned to ashes by the white fire of origin. Not only that, but even the Enkidu that locked Aziz Dakaha in the sky was filled with a large amount of power of origin. Roar! Aziz Dakaha couldn't help but let out a painful roar. If you didn't use the power of the black mud, you might be able to live a little longer, Wu Ming said regretfully. Unlike the state of the spirit clone, Wu Ming's power of origin was beyond imagination. And this endless source of power was the black mud of Aziz Dakaha. It could be said that it was the nemesis of the black mud. It was like seeing a fire and trying to extinguish it with straw. The straw would only be burned by the fire. If Aziz Dakaha had released all the black mud in his body in his previous state, it would have been easier for Wu Ming to deal with him. But unfortunately, the black mud on Aziz Dakaha's body had been greatly reduced by Wu Ming's son. But this had no effect on Wu Ming. Gradually, Aziz Dakaha's body turned pure white. That was the original color of Aziz Dakaha's body. It seemed that the black mud on Aziz Dakaha's body was almost completely burned away. Otherwise, the black mud would have been able to wrap around Aziz Dakaha's body. Roar! Dakaha didn't answer Wuming's question because the burning of his origin power was causing him so much pain that he wanted to die. He kept howling. Wuming could understand this kind of pain. When Gidia had detonated the black mud and injured Wuming, Wuming had also experienced this kind of pain. It was not only physical pain, but also mental pain. It was as if there was no solution, and he could only passively endure it. It was as if he was in hell. Although what was being burned was the black mud, Dakaha still felt pain. As long as there was a trace of the black mud left, he would not be able to escape this pain, this extremely fatal pain. I have indeed lost. Dakaha was finally able to speak instead of howling. Perhaps because the black mud had been reduced to a minimum, Dakaha's body had basically turned white. Only a trace of black could be seen on his limbs. Wuming quietly looked at Dakaha and did not interrupt him. Instead, he waited for him to continue speaking. However, after Dakaha finished speaking, he did not speak again. It was as if he had run out of energy and could not speak. Gradually, the black mud completely disappeared. The flames of the origin were also extinguished because of the disappearance of the black mud. Dakaha's dragon body turned from black to pure white. His shadow wings also disappeared. He was now like a three-headed lizard, locked in Wuming's dragon claws by the heavenly lock. Reality proved that the black mud had indeed been completely burned away by the flames of the origin. Under Wu Ming's command, the celestial lock loosened slightly. The pure white, three-headed dragon that was still unable to escape the celestial lock, its four limbs drooped loosely towards the ground. Dakahar's left and right heads also drooped naturally. Only the head in the middle seemed to be struggling helplessly before it slowly lifted its head. Its black and white eyes carefully looked at Wuming. Then Dakaha spoke. "Dragon of origin, this is indeed your victory. However, absolute evil, that you killed will still be born. This is a trial that humans must overcome." As someone who had temporarily become Wuming's kin because of the black mud, Dakaha now clearly understood what the Dragon of Origin was. At the same time, Dakaha no longer called Wuming an enemy, because now he was the final human trial's absolute evil Dakaha, without the black mud. He was no longer Wuming's kin. Your identity and status are indeed above the world. However, the world will not completely give in because of your interference. Even if I cannot be resurrected, a new absolute evil will be born for humans to test. As Dakaha spoke, his head in the middle gradually lowered. You don't have to worry about the future. Wuming did not have any ill intentions. He was just stating the truth. As he was about to die, he could not see the future. You're right. Being able to let go of everything and enter a deep sleep is not bad. Dakaha laughed as he looked at Wuming. He began to talk to himself. It's a pity the humans did not surpass me. With that, Dakaha's head drooped down, and there was no more movement. He's already gone? Although Dakaha looked like he was asleep, he was indeed dead. At this moment, of the two dragon horns on Wuming's head, the one at the back shone. The light shone on Dakaha's body, as if it was scanning him. Then, a cold but slightly emotional female voice entered Wuming's mind. "Master, it's confirmed that Dakaha is mentally dead. Thank you for your hard work, Kalis." Wuming's voice was filled with emotion. The female voice that appeared in Wuming's mind was Wuming's magic attire. It was an extra sister machine of the same model as Ilya's Ruby and Mayo's Sapphire Sophia, Lapis Kalis Balit. This crown-style magic attire followed Wuming's body to the box garden world. Of course, Enkidu also came with it. After confirming that Dakaha was dead, the heavenly lock around Dakaha's body was dispelled. Then, it wrapped around Silent Dragon's arm and returned to its original position. "Thank you for your hard work, little N." Wuming's hard work was indeed related to the two of them helping to deal with absolute evil and checking on absolute evil's death. But more importantly, It was Wu Ming's gratitude to Enkidu and Kalis for protecting his body in the box garden world. He thanked them for protecting him. Chapter 872. What was there to protect? Because Wu Ming saw it. After all, it was the experience of his original body. So Wu Ming, who had returned to his body, would naturally see the past experience in an instant. If he had to say something, it could be said that this was the only special vision. At this moment, Wu Ming slowly closed his eyes, preparing to digest the things he had seen before. The moment Wu Ming returned to his body, he saw all the experiences of his body in the world of the box court. However, because Az Dakaha was still in front of him, Wu Ming did not look at it in detail. Now that Az Dakaha had been destroyed, Wu Ming could read it again. Back then, when the box court had just been established, Wu Ming's body fell from the sky into the box court, and coincidentally, it fell at the location where No Name used to be. At that time, No Name had not yet established a community in that location, and the surrounding area was even a wasteland. Of course, most of the areas in the box court's early days were wastelands, because there were not many people in the box court when it was first established, especially the outer sect with the lower numbers. It could be said that in the beginning, there were unimaginably few people in the 7-digit outer sect. Similarly, because the box court's early system had not yet been established, the box court could be said to be very chaotic at that time. Wu Ming, this thing that exuded a powerful aura, also attracted a lot of attention. Many forces and even individuals came to the 7-digit outer sect to investigate, but the result was naturally to no avail. As for why, it was because they could not find any abnormalities. It was because the black origin mud covered up Wu Ming's aura, and the black origin mud sealed Wu Ming together with it. At that time, Wu Ming's consciousness had already returned to the big origin, so naturally, he could not move. However, Wu Ming's body was still suffering from the corrosion of the black origin mud, so Kalis and Enkidu combined the power of the black origin mud in Wu Ming's body to create a light membrane. They turned Wu Ming's body into a ball of light, sealed him together with the black origin mud, and buried him deep underground to prevent the black origin mud from flowing out. The two of them had experienced a lot with Wu Ming, and had seen the power of the black origin mud. In their opinion, if Wu Ming had consciousness at that time, he would have made the same choice. The facts prove that this was indeed the case. If Wu Ming still had consciousness at that time, he would have let the two of them seal the black mud together with his own body if there was no other way, so that the black mud would not leak out. However, in that case, the black origin mud could only continuously corrode Wu Ming, who was also inside the ball of light. Wu Ming did not think much of it. After all, his injuries could slowly recover, but those who were injured by the black origin mud would not be healed so easily. This was also one of the reasons why Wu Ming did not want the black origin mud to flow out. Fortunately, the black origin mud was boundless water and did not have a source. Once it was drained, it would completely disappear. In addition, Wu Ming's body was constantly producing origin power, so Wu Ming's body did not suffer too much damage. At most, he would feel a little pain. However, since Wu Ming's consciousness was not in his body, he naturally could not feel any pain. Therefore, Wu Ming did not blame Kalis and Enkidu for Wu Ming's actions. Although this was the case, Kalis and Enkidu had always placed Wu Ming first. If they did not understand Wu Ming, the two of them would not have chosen to seal the black origin mud in Wu Ming's body. Instead, they would have allowed the black origin mud to flow into this world and protect Wu Ming's body from harm. However, if they did that, Wu Ming would definitely be furious when he found out about their actions. Therefore, the two of them chose to seal the black origin mud in Wu Ming's body. However, they did not choose to sacrifice Wu Ming for the sake of the world. Kalis and Enkidu both understood that if they did that, Wu Ming's body would continue to be corroded by the black origin mud. Although it would not kill Wu Ming, it would still cause serious injuries to him in the end. Therefore, after the two of them chose to seal Wu Ming's body together with the black origin mud, they also chose to take the damage for Wu Ming. As Wu Ming's personal belongings, Even if the two of them chose the world, they would not give up on Wuming. The true meaning of being Wuming's personal belongings was to have both of them. Within the sphere of light, Enkidu extended his chains to their maximum length, completely wrapping around Wuming's body, while Kalas converted all of her mana into 100% defense, buffing Enkidu and Wuming's bodies. As a result, most of the Black Origin Mud's connection with Wuming was severed. Only a small portion of the Black Origin Mud in Wuming's body was still corroding Wuming's body. However, the endless amount of origin power he produced resisted it, so Wuming's body did not suffer much damage. However, Enkidu and Kalas suffered greatly. As existences who had followed Wuming for a long time, they had also produced a trace of origin power when they were in the origin. It was by relying on this trace of origin power that the two of them were able to resist the corrosion of the Black Origin Mud and protect Wuming's body. However, it was precisely because they had origin power that the two of them continuously endured the pain brought about by the Black Origin Mud. By the way, Kalas had used her ability to scan Wuming's consciousness and determined that Wuming's consciousness had automatically returned to the backup machine in the origin because he could not bear the pain brought about by the Black Origin Mud's explosion. Also, although the explosion had also affected Enkidu and Kalas, the two of them were unexpectedly only slightly affected by the explosion, while Wuming seemed to have taken the brunt of the damage caused by the Black Origin Mud. Under the circumstances where they were not injured, the two of them chose to seal the Black Origin Mud in Wuming's body, protecting both the world and Wuming's body, while quietly waiting for the day when Wuming would find his body. It had to be said that Wuming was quite angry when he saw this scene. What they did was no different from slow suicide, because they could not resist the corrosion of the Black Origin Mud at all. If possible, Wuming really hoped that the two of them would have allowed the Black Origin Mud to corrode Wuming. Although it was impossible to guarantee that the two of them would not be corroded by the Black Origin Mud, they could have attracted a lot of firepower. Although it was just a guess, it made sense that Wuming had attracted the firepower when Gidia detonated the Black Origin Mud. After all, Wuming was a good fuel for the Black Origin Mud. Even if he had to take a lot of damage, it would not have been a big deal. After all, Wuming's body could produce an endless amount of origin power, so he was not afraid of the Black Origin Mud. At most, he would be seriously injured. Speaking of which, it was really strange. Kalas and Enkidu were willing to sacrifice themselves for Wuming, while Wuming, who saw this scene, was also willing to let himself attract the firepower. It was really contradictory. However, it was also because of this that the bond between Wuming, Kalas, and Enkidu was manifested. It was also because of this that Wuming said emotionally to the two of them, "Thank you for your hard work." But in the end, the two of them still survived. Even if Wuming's consciousness was not present, he would not just wait for the two of them to suffer continuous damage and slowly die. This was because Enkidu's body, chains, and Kalas's body, crown, were tightly attached to Wuming. Because of this, the origin power in Wuming's body seamlessly acted as a reinforcement. The origin power was transmitted to the two of them, allowing them to successfully resist the Black Origin Mud and survive until now. Because of the Black Origin Mud, Wuming's aura had been concealed very well. Many people who had established a community in the outer sect of 210-5380 did not discover any traces of Wuming. It seemed that they had completely treated the legend of a mysterious object that had once fallen here as a mere story. Day after day passed. Gradually, Wuming completely cleaned out the Black Origin Mud in his body. Kalas and Enkidu also had the support of Wuming's origin power to slowly devour the Black Origin Mud. And when the amount of Black Origin Mud decreased to a certain extent, Wuming's powerful, mysterious, and noble aura leaked out. As a result, Wuming's aura caused the surroundings to change. Chapter 873. At that time, many communities had already been established in the surrounding area. After hearing about this, they all tried to occupy this place, wanting to dig out the gift from the ground and take it for themselves. However, because of the mutual interference, no community was able to occupy this place. Not long after, perhaps Enkidu and Kalis realized this problem. The reduction of the black mud caused Wuming's aura to leak out a little. Therefore, the two of them worked together to use the power of the origin in Wuming's body to strengthen the seal of the light membrane, causing the leaked aura to disappear. However, even if the aura disappeared, it was too late. The mysterious aura had indeed appeared here before, so it was still debated, and the surrounding communities were still fighting over it. In the past, No Name, who was not far from here, heard about this matter and came over. They took root in this land and put an end to the surrounding community's greed for the powerful gift under this land. At that time, No Name was the ruler of this area, so they had the right to do so. Of course, there were rumors in the outside world that No Name came to be the peacemaker in order to monopolize the mysterious gift in this land. However, No Name did not have such intentions. Even if they did, they would not be able to find the specific location. After all, the seal had been strengthened by Enkidu and Kalis. However, there was no guarantee that there would be a next time when the aura would leak out. No Name, who did not monopolize the mysterious gift, Wuming, once again sealed this land. Although it was called a seal, it was actually just a barrier that isolated them from the outside world. The purpose seemed to be to prevent Wuming's aura from leaking out again. Days passed like this, and Wuming's aura did not leak out again. Some of the surrounding communities also changed dynasties. Simply speaking, this matter had gradually faded away. However, 3 years ago, the Demon King suddenly attacked No Name for unknown reasons. After defeating No Name and taking away almost everything No Name had, the people behind the Demon King dug up Wuming along with the ground and took him away. Even if the other party didn't come for Wuming, they must have planned to kidnap this mysterious gift of Wuming as well. It seemed that the hole that Wuming had seen in No Name that had a trace of his own aura was left behind in this way. After that, perhaps for the sake of research, someone accidentally broke the seal. As one could well imagine, the source of the black mud emerged. Although Wuming couldn't see the other party's face clearly, he knew that they were definitely from the faction behind Galgi. Although they also realized that there was something in the black origin mud, the power of the black origin mud might have exceeded their expectations, and they panicked for a moment. But right after that, Wuming, Enkidu, and Kalis all entered a black box, which seemed to be a seal-type gift. This didn't mean that the black root soil was harmless, just because Enkidu and Kalis stopped their plan to eliminate it. The black root soil was still very corrosive when it was with something that was filled with the aura of origin power. In short, Wuming was sealed again. However, it seemed that the seal wasn't very effective. The black root soil was constantly corroding the seal, and this was also thanks to Wuming's origin power, eliminating a large amount of the black root soil. If it was the original amount of black root soil, let alone 3 years, the seal would have been broken in less than 3 days. And because they seemed to have fallen into the hands of an unknown enemy, Enkidu and Kalis slowed down or even stopped their work of eliminating the black root soil. They wanted to wait for Wuming to come to this world first. After all, if they completely eliminated the black root soil before Wuming arrived, Wuming's unconscious body would definitely be used by this unknown enemy. As for why, Wuming guessed that the other party was the enemy behind Galgi, but Enkidu and Kalis didn't know. However, there was one thing that they were certain of, and that was that the people who attacked No Name and took away Wuming's body were not good people. At the very least, they were already on opposing sides. Not to mention that these people were also trying to study Wuming. And the black root soil became an invisible shield, protecting Wuming's body from being studied by the enemy. And without origin power, these people had no good way to break the black root soil, unless they assimilated with the black root soil. However, Wuming felt that they would definitely not choose to do so. As for why, it was just Wuming's intuition towards these people with bad habits. After that, about 3 years had passed. From time to time, some people would open the seal to examine and study it. It seemed that they were not willing to accept the fact that the black root soil was a hot potato and felt that they had to study it even if they had to burn the skin of their hands. During this period, people or objects would be thrown in from time to time, as if those people were studying the black root soil. However, whenever a third-rate person came in, Enkidu and Kalis would use their origin power to corrode the black root soil, and the stimulated black root soil would corrode the person who came in. It must be known that if the black root soil was accepted by an outsider, it would fuse with that person like a symbiotic entity. If that happened, it would be difficult to deal with, which was why Enkidu and Kalis did this. As for indirectly causing the death of someone, sorry, but this was the right thing to do. First, it could prevent the enemy from studying Wuming's body, and prevent the enemy from having the opportunity to study it. Second, it could prevent the black root soil from fusing with an outsider as a parasite, because if an evil person were to coexist with the black root soil, then it would cause a disaster in this world. Thinking about it this way, Enkidu and Kalis could be considered to have contributed to the box garden world. In short, they did not study anything for 3 years. It was unknown whether they were not in a hurry or were not interested, but the number of times they opened the seal box to experiment on Wuming also decreased. Perhaps it was also related to the fact that they did not study anything even once. One day, someone opened the seal on the box and put Wuming's body into multiple layers of gift cards. Without the seal effect of the box, the mere gift cards could not resist the corrosion of the black root soil. In the end, the black root soil destroyed all the gift cards, and the black root soil poured into the outside world. At the same time, the black root soil seemed to have broken some kind of seal on the outside world and released a white, three-headed dragon. The last thing Wuming's body saw was the three-headed dragon absorbing the black root soil, including Wuming's body, into its body. The light that Wuming's body turned into was right where the three-headed dragon's heart was. Needless to say, this was definitely Galji's doing. He put the unsealed black root soil into the seal of absolute evil. The black root soil, which was also a bug like Wuming, easily broke Az Dakaha's seal. Wuming already knew the rest, so he didn't need to continue watching. Chapter 874. Kalis, record my memory and make it into a projection. I might need it later. Wuming opened his eyes and said to the dragon horn headpiece on his head, "Yes, master." Kalis began to read Wuming's memory. Without a doubt, Kalis, as a pure support-type magic attire, could definitely do this. Reading Wuming's memory was nothing to be surprised about. Wuming, who trusted Kalis very much, wouldn't care about this. As for Kalis, who was extremely loyal to Wuming, her mission was to perfectly carry out Wuming's orders. Then, Wuming looked at the golden chain on his dragon arm. "Enkidu, are you there?" "Master Wuming, I'm here." Enkidu's elf-like voice entered Wuming's mind. Enkidu and Kalis were very similar. They were both existences without bodies. The former lost her body, while the latter didn't have a body to begin with. Both of them were also loyal to Wuming and were willing to follow Wuming for the rest of their lives. Both of them defined themselves as Wuming's tools for Wuming to use. Enkidu's actions were even more serious than Kalis. Kalis was an existence similar to an artificial intelligence, so it was natural for her to talk to Wuming. On the other hand, Enkidu was a heavenly lock, a chain. What was a chain? It was a weapon, and a weapon didn't need to communicate with its master. Therefore, Enkidu and Wuming didn't have much interaction. She wouldn't be jealous of Kalis. After all, Enkidu could speak whenever he wanted to. Wuming didn't forbid Enkidu from speaking. It was just that Enkidu didn't want to speak because of his definition of a weapon. However, whenever Wuming took the initiative to talk to Enkidu, Enkidu would always respond to Wuming enthusiastically. Seeing that Enkidu responded to him, Wuming didn't rush to talk to Enkidu. Instead, he continued to call out to Kalis. "And Kalis, Master," Kalis asked. After the two of them turned their attention to Wuming, Wuming spoke. "This kind of situation won't happen again, I promise you." Wuming's tone was full of seriousness. Wuming was naturally referring to Enkidu and Kalas, who had followed Wuming's body into this world for an unknown period of time. Moreover, they had been protecting Wuming's body for such a long time. At that time, due to the unbearable pain caused by the explosion of the black soil, Wuming's consciousness directly separated from his body. This was something that couldn't be stopped. Although this wasn't Wuming's fault, and Enkidu and Kalas didn't blame Wuming, Wuming couldn't stand it. Last time was my mistake. I promise you, there won't be a next time. What Wuming meant was that next time, he would definitely eliminate Gidia completely. He definitely wouldn't let Gidia do it again. Of course, we agree with the idea of eradicating Gaia, but Kalas paused mid-sentence, and Enkidu continued. You don't have to do this, Master. The two of them meant that Wuming didn't have to make a special promise to them. No matter what, I will always be your chief priest, Master Wuming. There isn't a priest who doesn't want to stay with the god they believe in. You are my master, and I don't think it's a sad thing to stay with you. Wuming couldn't help but laugh in his heart. I was being pretentious. Indeed, with the relationship between Wuming, Enkidu, and Kalas, there was no need for him to take care of himself. However, Wuming always forgot, or perhaps it was because he valued Wuming so much that he forgot. Now, let's deal with the problem of Az Dakaha. After Wuming finished speaking, he looked at his dragon claw. Silent Sound hadn't done much damage to Aziz Dakaha. All he had done was bind him with the Skylock, burn him with the Origin Fire, and stab him with the Gold Sword. That shouldn't have been enough to kill Aziz Dakaha. In the end, Az Dakaha died just like that. It was a dramatic scene of, I didn't even do anything and you're already dead. According to what Kalas said, Az Dakaha died of spiritual causes. Kalas, what do you mean by spiritual death? Wuming asked. Master, the spiritual death that I have concluded is the disappearance of the soul. In other words, your physical body is still alive. That was why Az Dakaha looked like he was asleep. Simply put, his soulless body was not completely dead. Wuming guessed that Aziz Dakaha's powers had been sealed by the Gold Sword, which caused his godhead to be low. Afterward, the Origin Fire burned the black mud in his body and burned his soul away. Although Az Dakaha's body was still alive, it was only a matter of time before he died. What was important was the words Az Dakaha left behind before he died. As a BUG, Wuming could indeed ignore the rules and forcefully eliminate the trials that humans had to pass if they wanted to survive. However, at the same time, the world would create new trials for humans to pass. For example, your neighbor's parents arranged for your neighbor's child to mow the grass by hand to train him. Coincidentally, you were weeding with a lawnmower. Afterward, you helped the neighbor's child mow the grass. This would be seen by the parents, but because you had good intentions, they would not say anything. However, for the sake of their child, they would still give the child a new training mission. It was the same in the box court world. Wuming helped humans eliminate the trials that they had to pass, so the world would rearrange the trials for them. Az Dakaha, who had the identity of absolute evil in the final trial, was indeed killed by Wuming. However, the identity of absolute evil was not killed. The world could pull out another evil god from the myths and let him become absolute evil for humans to pass the trials. This problem needs to be solved, Wuming said in a low voice. From the world's point of view, humans, who had become the leader of all things, had to accept the trials to prevent humans from becoming arrogant and destroying the world and themselves. However, from Wuming's point of view, even without the trials, humans would not become like that. Wuming believed in humans and the infinite possibilities of humans. However, the world was not human. It would not reason with you and would only do things according to the rules. Absolute evil. Wuming stared at Az Dakaha's corpse and pondered. It seemed like he was considering a certain possibility. However, at this moment, within the range of Wuming's mental power, two figures flew over from afar. Chapter 875. These two figures were White Yiksha and Vera, Holy White Dragon. White Yiksha slowly reduced her flying speed. The other party's aura gave White Yiksha, who was nervous at the moment, a very dangerous feeling. Right now, she was not the opponent of this dragon that occupied almost the entire magma lake. Not only that, the dragon gave White Yiksha a very unusual feeling. It was as if she was facing the whole world. At the same time, there was a sense of familiarity, as if she had seen it somewhere before. White Yiksha shook her head and stopped thinking about it. The most important thing now was she had to determine whether this dragon was an enemy or a friend first. Villo is there, Vera said casually again and rushed over again. Wait a minute, Vera? White Yiksha felt a headache coming on. Vera was good at everything, but she was a natural airhead, which was quite helpless. In this helplessness, White Yiksha also sped up and flew over with Vera. White Yiksha, Vera, you're here. Wuming saw the two people coming and greeted them. Thou are a Villo? White Yiksha was shocked. It was not White Yiksha's fault for not recognizing Wuming. After all, although the aura of the follower's spiritual base and the aura of the main body were somewhat similar, Wuming's main body's aura was more unique. It was like the difference between tofu and stinky tofu. In short, this seemingly dangerous dragon in front of them was one of them. Vera has become so big. Vera excitedly flew around Wuming's big head and said, Is it very big? I think it's just right. Although Wuming did not have much awareness, his body had indeed grown a lot in the box court world. After all, he had fallen into the box court world since the creation of the box court. Although it had not reached hundreds of millions of years, it had been thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, and so on. In short, it could only be more and not less. And such a long time of settling down in exchange for Wuming's growth. At this moment, he was not much smaller than the 54545 outer sect. If he spread his wings that had been curled up, he would probably completely surpass this outer sect. As for how big an outer sect was, Wuming had no idea. Anyway, the box court world was very big. The diameter of the Earth was about 12,700 kilometers. From a North District to No Name, it would be 980,000 kilometers. Moreover, this was the distance from a North District to No Name. Moreover, Wuming's current body size could be freely controlled. Therefore, the size of his body was not very significant. Really, my heart has been taken care of during this period of time. It had to be said that White Yiksha, who was used to living a peaceful life, was a bit like an old man. Once he was stimulated, his heart would not be good. Just as Wuming was thinking this, White Yiksha instantly looked at Wuming. She had a nagging feeling that Wuming was thinking of something bad. Vera, on the other hand, saved the day. Villo, are you hurt? Vera, who had flown to Wuming's head, sat down on Wuming's head without holding back. I'm fine. Thanks to Az Dakaha, my body has been found. Also, Az Dakaha is already dead, Wuming said as he lifted Az Dakaha's corpse in his dragon claws. Back then, I thought that thou must be extraordinary. I didn't expect thy true identity to exceed my expectations. White Yiksha also approached Wuming and observed him carefully. At this moment, Az Dakaha was no longer that important. I have a feeling that I've seen thee somewhere before. Looking at Wuming, a sense of familiarity surged in White Yiksha's heart again. However, she just could not recall where she had seen Wuming. When White Yiksha said this, Wuming had some guesses. According to White Yiksha's experience, White Yiksha had probably existed when Wuming had fallen into the box court. White Yiksha at that time should have been called White Night King. Since that was the case, it was not strange that White Night King had sensed Wuming's aura. Perhaps my aura had leaked into this world at some point. After all, my identity is very special. Dragon of Origins? White Yiksha suddenly spoke. Wuming was shocked. He did not say anything, but White Yiksha had guessed it immediately. Although Wuming's expression did not change much, and he did not answer White Yiksha's question, it was because of Wuming's appearance that White Yiksha was even more certain that her guess was correct. Mama, don't be so surprised. It's not strange that I know about the Dragon of Origins. I'm on the top 10 in the box court. White Yiksha smiled rather proudly. White Yiksha's words made Wu Ming fall into deep thought. It seemed that from the beginning until now, many people knew about the existence of the Dragon of Origins. Back then, Wu Ming's master, Skaha, had seen through Wu Ming's essence at a glance. Although that was related to Wu Ming's incomplete awakening, many people still recognized Wu Ming's identity later on. Although many knew of Wu Ming's identity because they had come into contact with the Black Origin soil, there were also those who knew of Wu Ming's identity without coming into contact with the Black Origin soil. Without exception, they were all high-level existences such as gods. Back in the burning Winterwood City, although the twin goddesses' combat strength was very weak, they had seen through Wu Ming's identity just by coming into contact with Wu Ming. They had surrendered because of that. As a star spirit, White Yiksha had also recognized Wu Ming's identity. Perhaps that was the reason. White Yiksha seemed to have seen through Wu Ming's thoughts, so he spoke. It seems that you have something on your mind. After this matter, I have something to say to you. You will definitely like it. It seemed that White Yiksha wanted to discuss the problem of the power of origins with Wu Ming in detail. Wu Ming was naturally eager for this. He still hoped to obtain more information about the Dragon of Origins from an insider. After all, Wu Ming had never seen his own race. Wu Ming's hometown had been found. Now, it was time to find Wu Ming's own race. Now, we have to deal with the problem of absolute evil. As White Yiksha spoke, he landed on Wu Ming's dragon claw and arrived beside Aziki Daka's body that had yet to completely die. If you killed absolute evil, I'm afraid it won't be so easy to deal with, right? White Yiksha turned his head and looked at Wu Ming's big eyes. From the looks of it, White Yiksha also knew that the power of origins was a bug. According to Az Dakaha's last words, a new absolute evil might be born after Az Dakaha's death. But this absolute evil will no longer be Az Dakaha. Although he said that, Wu Ming didn't have a headache at all. It's indeed very difficult. White Yiksha fell into deep thought. She was the same as Wu Ming. She also had a headache over the world's actions. Look at how confident you are. Could it be that you have a good idea? With my strength, even if another absolute evil appears, I can still easily destroy it, Wu Ming replied in a deep voice. Indeed, with Wu Ming's nature of ignoring the box court's rules, all he needed to do was use powerful means to attack the new absolute evil. He didn't need to care about the restrictions brought about by absolute evil's identity. But that way, a new absolute evil will definitely be born, right? White Yiksha shook his head and denied it. That's why I'm not prepared to do that. Wu Ming shook his head. I have a better idea. Chapter 876. However, at that moment, Vera, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke. Villo, isn't it hot to stay in here all the time? Vera asked in concern as she tilted her head. After hearing Vera's words, Wu Ming also realized this point. It's not hot, but I still have to thank Vera for her concern. As the magma didn't cause much damage to Wu Ming, well, basically no damage, Wu Ming subconsciously ignored this point. To Wu Ming, soaking in the magma was like soaking in a hot spring that wasn't too hot. It wasn't very comfortable, but it was at least warm. Speaking of which, it's indeed inconvenient to talk to you like this. After Wu Ming said that his body emitted light as his dragon body transformed into a blob of light that instantly shrank. When the light dissipated, Wu Ming in his human form floated in the air with Vera in his arms and appeared in front of White Yiksha. He still had black hair and red eyes. There weren't any major changes. Where's absolute evil's corpse? White Yiksha asked. How could such a large human in the final trial be gone in an instant? I've placed Az Dakaha's corpse in my gift card. It might come in handy later. As Wu Ming spoke, he raised his free hand and waved the gift card in his hand. Ignoring the fact that the three-headed dragon was already dead, his body wasn't completely dead. Even if it was a living creature, it could be stored in the gift card. Wu Ming's body had been stored in the gift card, so Celestia could also enter Wu Ming's gift card. By the way, White Yiksha, did the flames created by the sun's incarnation injure anyone? Wu Ming was very clear about the power of the flame pillar created by the sun's incarnation. It was a powerful flame that affected the entire outer sect of the 5-4-5-4-5 sect. If there was anyone around, they would probably be injured if not killed. Thanks to you, no one died. When Wu Ming said this, White Yiksha was furious. After all, the power of that attack was too great. If White Yiksha hadn't been cautious and let the people of the Alliance retreat first, not many of them would have been able to survive. This wasn't a joke, but a fact. Not many people in the Alliance could withstand Wu Ming's Sunday. Although it was called an alliance, it was only a team formed by a dozen or so communities in the outer sect. Furthermore, due to absolute evil's sudden attack, it was unrealistic to instantly form a true alliance. If not for Vera's presence and the news of White Yiksha's impending arrival, few people would have been able to resist Az Dakaha. After all, White Yiksha, White Yiksha, White Yiksha's White Yiksha, and Yiksha's White Yiksha's thought. They were the weaks they were, Yiksha. However, if they ran away, the ordinary residents of Boxting would suffer. The reason why these communities were able to take root in their respective lands was not because of their powerful strength, but also because the nearby residents helped each other. If you can save my life when I'm in danger, it's not in vain for me to take care of you. This could be considered a debt of gratitude. However, people like Shadora didn't care about debt of gratitude. Or rather, she still didn't understand the so-called debt of gratitude. In her opinion, her salamandra was taken care of by the outer sect members of the 5-4-5-4-5 Yiksha. Therefore, she would definitely stand in front of everyone to fight against the incoming enemy. Moreover, if a Yiksha escaped, the reputation of the Yiksha would be ruined. The Yiksha world's most important component. If one had to describe it, it was equivalent to a country. However, Yiksha had a lot of countries. The name and flag of a country naturally became the two most important things. And the thing that was linked to these two was reputation. Although Yiksha didn't have a bad reputation after being attacked by the Demon King, they were no longer welcomed by others. After all, Yiksha was so weak that they couldn't even feed themselves, let alone have any value in befriending them. However, No Name did not have a bad reputation. In other words, if No Name became stronger, there would still be people who wanted to befriend him. Similarly, if your reputation was tarnished, then no one would want to befriend you. In fact, no one would want to befriend you in the future. As mentioned earlier, the number of communities in the box court world was more than the number of stars in the sky. There was no need for the other communities to be so close to you, as there were other communities that could replace you. Under the same condition with only one variable, if one community had a much better reputation than the other, any smart person would choose to associate with the community with a good reputation instead of the community with a bad reputation. From this, it could be seen how important reputation was to the community. Therefore, when they learned that Vera and White Yiksha were helping, these people gritted their teeth and took a gamble. If they won, it would increase their reputation. If they lost, then, anyway, if they didn't gamble, they wouldn't be able to survive in the end. At the very least, these people were here. Since they were here, no matter what their mentality was, they were all family. As for his family, White Yiksha felt that it was fine as long as they didn't die. Since no one died, let's think of a way to restore the outer door of 5-4-5-4-5. Wu Ming looked at the surrounding magma. Not only was a large area of the outer door of 54,545 hollowed out, but was also covered by magma of unknown depth. Even if there were any special gifts, it would take a long time to restore the outer door of 54,545 that had turned into magma to its original state. Thou needn't worry about that. Although it will take a lot of time, it's just the ground and buildings. It's not difficult for me or the people of outer door of 54,545. White Yiksha was right. Although the resources in the North District were scarce, on the contrary, the North District had a large number of gifts that could be used for a long time. Some useful gifts could be used to remove the magma or directly transform it into the ground. The main point was that because of Wuming's monstrous fire pillar, many people were dehydrated, burned, and unconscious. Many people are injured. If this drags on, no one knows if their lives will be in danger. At the moment, we don't have time to treat them. This was what troubled White Yiksha. Although the North District had many gifts that could be used for a long time, there weren't many healing-type gifts. Moreover, there were so many people. Fortunately, Az Dakaha was defeated. If these bug-like people were to fight Az Dakaha, they would probably be sending themselves to their deaths. Since it's because of me, let me help. Wuming volunteered. Chapter 877. After Wuming finished speaking, he fully released his mind power. In an instant, it spread throughout the entire outer 54545, and he easily saw the wounded. There are so many of them. Even Wuming was shocked. See? That's right, there are so many of them. White Yiksha sighed. You did give me a shock, but as Wuming spoke, he threw Vera, who had been obediently lying in his arms without speaking, into the sky. Ugh! Although Vera was not frightened, she still let out a whimper. Immediately after, Wuming shook his body and light covered his entire body. His body expanded greatly and turned back into a dragon's body. But this time his body was much smaller than before. And Vera, who was thrown up high by Wuming, just happened to be sitting on Wuming's neck. Villo, are you going to help the wounded? Vera, who was sitting on Wuming's neck, held Wuming's dragon horns tightly with both hands and looked at Wuming with her head tilted to the side. Of course, although I did get a shock, this amount is still not a problem. As Wuming spoke, he did not care about White Yiksha anymore. He flapped his wings and flew away. Really, since you're so confident, let me see. White Yiksha could only smile helplessly. Then, he slowly followed Wuming. With Wuming's current speed, it only took a few seconds to fly to the outer 54,545's realm wall. Wuming looked at the half-melted realm wall and could not help but sigh. Even the realm wall can't withstand it. Looks like I went a little overboard. However, in this way, Wuming had a further understanding of the power of his authority. Staying in the air, Wuming looked down at the people below who were panicking because of his arrival. They really did not know that Az Dakaha had been killed, and Wuming was emitting an extremely powerful aura, so it was inevitable that they would panic. However, this panic was only temporary. This was because Wuming had already started chanting the spirit of words. Along with Wuming's words, the pointer on the huge disc in Wuming's heart suddenly pointed to the direction of 7 o'clock. The incarnation of vitality was instantly activated. Wuming's whole body was exuding a strong breath of life. Then, Wuming chanted a new incantation. In the disc in his heart, the second needle of the new needle pointed to the 6 o'clock direction. God says that humans are sinful. God said that humans needed to be purified. With this, you will bestow the torrential flood upon me. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant the people of this world equal freedom. For a moment, the flood was also activated. The so-called flood was generally a natural disaster of God. In other words, the flood came from the sky, rain. The reason why it could become a flood on the ground was because the amount of rain was too much. Then, if the amount of rain was reduced, wouldn't it become normal rain? For example now, the sun was still hanging in the sky, and there were no dark clouds, but the rain came out of nowhere. Drop by drop, it fell on the ground and fell on the people. The area was so large that it even affected the surrounding outer doors. Why is it suddenly raining? There are no clouds either? Is it the enemy's move? Is it the work of the wyvern in the sky? This group of people was noisy, and they began to look for tools to shelter themselves from the rain. Some even took out the gift of shelter. However, not everyone thought that it was an enemy attack. Some people who were guarding their unconscious companions found that their unconscious companions had woken up. Their originally red and hot bodies had calmed down, and their injuries were basically healed. Some people who were directly drenched in the rain found that their small injuries had disappeared directly. There were also people who were not injured. Although they were not injured, They were slightly tired, but after being drenched by the rain, their fatigue disappeared. There's grass growing? A sharp-eyed person suddenly saw a blade of grass rapidly growing out of the ground. The fresh leaves were verdant and full of life. Following that, someone shouted, "This rain is full of vitality." It was not known who had a special gift, but he directly used the gift to test the rain and found out that the rain contained a lot of vitality. All kinds of phenomena made the people unable to react, but that person's words were like the last straw that broke the camel's back, making the people explode. The people who were originally sheltering from the rain no longer sheltered from the rain and directly ran into the rain. The people who took out their grace to block the rain silently put it away with their faces flushed red. The unconscious and injured people were also pushed to the open space where there was no shelter and were drenched in the rain. Looking at the people who were constantly moving below, Wu Ming couldn't help but shake his head. They didn't know whether the enemy was destroyed or not, but they were still so excited because of the rain of life. Sure enough, most people were a bunch of crooks. However, there were still people who were still vigilant, such as Shadora. Although Shadora and Salamandra were also receiving the baptism of the rain of life, Shadora was still constantly giving orders, such as taking care of the injured and paying attention to the investigation, and so on. Villo's ability? At this time, Vera, who was riding on Wu Ming's neck, also opened her mouth because she was also in the baptism of the rain of life. The power obtained from killing a god is not worth mentioning, Wu Ming said rather modestly. The vitality and recovery brought by the incarnation of vitality fused with the incarnation of flood to help the injured recover in the form of rain. It was a very simple use of the power. However, Vera didn't think that it was really not worth mentioning like Wu Ming said. Not to mention other things, this gift that could restore the vitality of so many people, Wu Ming casually used it, and it didn't seem to be at full strength, nor was it a one-time use. This was already very surprising. Not to mention, Wu Ming's reign of life affected several outer sect members. Wu Ming was also very helpless about this. This group of people in the alliance originally surrounded the outer sect of the 54545. If he simply released the reign of life in one place, the people in other places wouldn't be able to receive it, so he had no choice but to increase the range of the reign of life. Anyway, it didn't take much effort. In Wu Ming's view, it was just an apology for burning the entire outer sect of the 54545. However, Wu Ming forgot that at that time, the Black Mud Cave occupied the entire outer sect of the 54545. Even if it didn't burn the entire outer sect of the 54545, he still had to clean it up afterwards. As expected of you, you've really broadened my horizons once again. Chapter 878. The person who spoke was naturally White Yiksha, who would follow behind. Speaking of which, Villo, you're really omnipotent. White Yiksha crossed her arms as she floated beside Wu Ming. She was also receiving the baptism of the rain of life. The last trace of her mental exhaustion had also completely disappeared. This rain of life is enough to heal all the injured. I'll take my leave then. I won't be participating in the reconstruction of the outer sect of 54,545. After all, there are still many things to deal with. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he flapped his wings and flew into the distance. Hey, why don't you leave Vera behind? White Yiksha roared in annoyance. Vera can't help much anyway. It's not like she's missing. Wu Ming's voice came from the sky. Immediately after, black-purple ripples appeared. Wu Ming and Vera's figures disappeared. Seriously, my role is really just to clean up this Villo's mess. Although her tone was helpless, White Yiksha wasn't dissatisfied. After knowing that absolute evil had broken through the seal, she had thought of many endings. Now, all she had to do was sacrifice land and towns to kill absolute evil. It couldn't be better. Moreover, other than a small number of people who died because of the chaos at the beginning, there were basically no more casualties. Because of Wu Ming's reign of life, everyone's physical injuries and mental exhaustion had recovered. It could be said that everyone was happy. White Yiksha's mood was much better after eliminating absolute evil at such a low price. Even if she had to clean up someone else's mess, White Yiksha was happy. Go, or make the final speech. After White Yiksha finished speaking, she flew down. After all, in the absence of Vera, only White Yiksha could make the final declaration of victory. At that moment, in a place far away that was not affected by the rain of life, a few people who were obviously Salamandra were carrying a person who had fainted from the ups and downs of the journey. They were still speeding up. Lord Mandela, we're almost at the next outer sect. You have to hold on. However, at that moment, Mandela could no longer speak. Immediately after, Mandela's head tilted and he completely fainted. Lord Mandela, between 399, 9999, and 400000 was the place where the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was held. As they had confirmed that Absolute Evil's doppelganger had completely disappeared, the restoration work had already begun. Whether it was the ground or the houses, they were all being restored by professionals with their blessings. The undamaged bell tower was the fastest to be repaired. At the highest point of the bell tower, dark purple ripples appeared, and Wuming, who had already transformed into his human form, emerged with Vera in his arms. Wuming sighed as he gently put Vera down. Previously, Wuming still had business to attend to, so he didn't pay much attention to Vera's body. Now that he had relaxed, Wuming realized how ridiculous Vera's body was. Where is this? Vera had some impression of this place, because Wuming had asked Vera to wait for him here. Sorry, I've never been to the Northern District before. I'm only familiar with this place. Sitting on the edge of the bell tower, Wuming took a deep breath and exhaled. It had to be said that no one would come here. Moreover, it's such a high place. The fresh but not cold air could also clear one's mind. Why did Villo bring me here? Imitating Wuming, Vera also sat on the edge of the bell tower, right next to Wuming. I wanted to tell you that Maxwell is dead. Wuming's words made Vera's body tremble, but it was only a slight tremble. Vera was clearly shocked. What? You don't believe me? Wuming put his hands on the edge and turned to look at Vera. Vera shook her head silently. I was just shocked. She wasn't shocked that Wuming killed Maxwell. Vera was shocked that she had forgotten the beginning. Vera only now realized that she and Wuming only wanted to deal with Maxwell in the beginning. When they met Maxwell in the outer gate of 54,545, Wuming signaled for Vera to leave temporarily and deal with Maxwell alone. Then, for some reason, the human final trial sealed under Raging Flame City was released. Raging Flame City and even the entire outer gate of 54,545 fell into the territory. The entire outer gate of 54,545 also turned into AZ Dakaha's Demon Denver. After that, Vera and the surrounding outer gate communities formed a not-so-good alliance. Vera really didn't know what to do next. She did have many methods, but when facing the Black Mud, she couldn't use them, or they were completely ineffective. She believed that Wuming, who was still in the Black Mud den, would be fine. She had no basis, just pure trust. From the beginning, when Wuming was willing to help Vera deal with Maxwell, Vera also began to trust Wuming. However, she was still worried. In the end, she could only pray that White Yiksha could come as soon as possible, or that the Sky Army of the upper echelons of the Box Court could come as soon as possible. However, who would have thought that Wu Ming would be able to kill absolute evil? Moreover, he had used so many amazing moves. Even White Yiksha's understanding of Wu Ming was renewed. Vera, who didn't know as much about Wu Ming as White Yiksha, also had a renewed understanding of Wu Ming. Therefore, Vera wasn't surprised that Wu Ming, who could kill absolute evil, could also kill Maxwell. Don't anyone know how I killed Maxwell? Wu Ming was a little depressed. No. Vera shook her head hard. The existence of foul on her chest also shook a little. The corner of Wu Ming's mouth twitched slightly. He silently turned his head and no longer looked at Vera. Maxwell is dead. You don't have to hide anymore. This was the message Wu Ming wanted to convey to Vera. In Wu Ming's opinion, A large part of the reason why Vera didn't have a fixed place to stay all day was because of Maxwell's pestering. Now, Vera could stay in the community obediently and take on the responsibility of being the leader of the community. However, why did Vera wander around all day? Vera was probably the only one who knew. Wuming suddenly thought of something and looked at Vera again. By the way, Vera, Maxwell dropped a gift after his death. Are you interested? It could be said that Vera helped Wuming lure Maxwell out. If they were to split the loot, Vera would definitely have a share. At that moment, Vera shook her head frantically. At the same time, Vera's chest trembled. Okay, I got it. Wuming, who turned his head again, sighed. Sure enough, even if Maxwell was dead, Vera still didn't want to have anything to do with him. Then, the gift that Maxwell dropped could only be enjoyed by Wuming alone. Then, Wuming turned his head again to look at Vera. I'll send you home. After all, Vera shouldn't have returned to her community for a long time. It just so happened that she could go back now. Home? Not knowing what to think, Vera smiled and nodded. Chapter 879. Inside the inherent enchantment of the staff of Anzavolgan, the 7th floor, the lava zone. Galgi sat alone on a higher rock with his eyes closed as if he was resting. Although the terrain was higher, the rock was still slightly red due to the temperature of the lava zone. Not only that, but the surrounding temperature also made Galgi quite uncomfortable. Helplessly, he could only silently half-activate the simulated another cosmology to resist the heat of the rock and the surrounding temperature. At this moment, there was a spatial fluctuation around Galgi. A black-purple ripple appeared, and Wuming jumped out from it. After sending Vera off, Wuming immediately came here. He had something to discuss with Galgi. You don't look too bad, Wuming joked with Galgi. Galgi opened his eyes and looked at Wuming, his eyes full of shock and fear. He didn't know what he saw and couldn't remember it at all. It was as if he had seen something beyond his level. His brain began to tremble, and his body began to feel uncomfortable as if he was about to explode and die. Galgi subconsciously canceled the half-activated simulation of another cosmology, bent over, and kept retching. Ugh, if Galgi had the courage to resist Wuming before, then he had no thoughts of resisting the current Wuming. Would ants try to kill Earth? Ants didn't have such thoughts at all. They didn't even realize what Earth was. At this moment, Galgi was somewhat similar to an ant. However, this ant realized what Earth was, so he couldn't resist at all. Moreover, it was as if understanding what Earth was beyond the scope of understanding for an ant like him. Galgi's body couldn't bear it and was about to explode. Wuming silently frowned when he saw Galgi like this. Why is Galgi so rude? He vomits as soon as he sees someone. However, what Wuming didn't know was that the reason why Galgi was like this was because the half-activated simulated cosmology allowed Galgi to see the high-level Wuming. If Galgi fully activated the simulated cosmology, he would probably explode on the spot with just a glance. Wuming was a little unhappy at this moment. He didn't care about Galgi and let him retch alone. Galgi retched for a while and spat out some unknown liquid, which was instantly evaporated by the high temperature of the lava field. Then, Galgi tried to raise his head again and look at Wuming. Sure enough, after canceling the simulation of another cosmology, Galgi's feeling of looking at Wuming again was not much different from before. Galgi himself also understood that it was probably the simulation of another cosmology that allowed Galgi to glimpse a corner of Silent Cry's true self. After adjusting his state of mind, Galgi stood up with a respectful attitude. At this moment, Galgi no longer had any thoughts of resisting Wuming. Are you okay? Wuming looked at the strange Galgi and was puzzled. Why is he so respectful after vomiting? I'm fine, Sir Villo. May I ask what happened to Absolute Evil? Galgi looked at Wuming respectfully. Az Dakaha is dead. Wuming wasn't used to Galgi's attitude. Wuming turned his head and didn't look at Galgi. He really is dead. Galgi wasn't surprised as if he took it for granted. This puzzled Wuming. You killed him, didn't you? This piqued Wuming's interest. Galgi clearly knew that humans wouldn't be killed by non-human existences in the final trial, and this information was given to Wuming by Galgi. So why was he so sure that Wu Ming had killed Az. How so? Wu Ming asked. The aura you give me now is very different. There is a hint of seriousness in Galji's respectful eyes, as if he wanted to get to know Wu Ming all over again. Right now, I don't have any thoughts of resisting you at all. It was mainly because of the half-activated simulated cosmology that Galji saw some existences in Wu Ming that he couldn't understand and couldn't bear. After all, Galji had been considering whether to fully activate the simulated cosmology to kill Wu Ming immediately after Wu Ming appeared. In the end, he had almost died. Galji now understood why Wu Ming dared to leave him alone. It was because Wu Ming had that kind of strength. The corner of Wu Ming that Galji saw could completely reflect Wu Ming's strength. Even if the simulated cosmology was the power of a universe group, it couldn't instantly kill a bug like the root dragon. At most, it could only cause some damage. After all, it must be known that Galji was able to see those things just now because of the simulation of another cosmology. Since he was able to see the truth of Silent Wonder, it would at least have some effect, but it was probably only a little. Moreover, if Galji really used the simulated cosmology to launch a sneak attack on Wu Ming, today would probably be his death anniversary. I was indeed the one who killed Az. Wu Ming had no intention of hiding it. Instead, he openly admitted it. But Wu Ming didn't say how he killed Az. However, Galji didn't need Wu Ming to tell him. What a joke. He almost died just by looking at Az. So how could it be difficult for Az. to deal with absolute evil? Immediately after, Wu Ming said, "By the way, Maxwell is also dead." Galji was taken aback. Before the battle with absolute evil, Wu Ming clearly told Galji that Maxwell was captured by Wu Ming. And now, Galji and Wu Ming had only met for less than a day, and Galji was told by Wu Ming that Maxwell was dead. No matter how one looked at it, it was full of contradictions. But immediately after, Galji calmed down. Logically speaking, Wu Ming wouldn't lie about such a thing. In other words, Maxwell died during this period of time, or Wu Ming immediately executed Maxwell after killing Az. The correct answer was that Maxwell died during this period of time. The boon game that Wu Ming set up for Maxwell was to defeat the host in a specified location and time. After Galji killed Wu Ming's clone with another cosmology, Wu Ming created another clone and got it to accompany Maxwell while he went to look for Galji. At that time, Maxwell wasn't dead yet, so Wu Ming wasn't lying when he told Galji and the others that Maxwell was captured by me. And now, Maxwell was naturally executed as a death penalty by the boon game. Not to mention that Silent had already left, leaving behind only a doppelganger. Maxwell couldn't even beat a doppelganger. Silent's doppelganger watched as Maxwell gradually went crazy due to the approaching death. In the end, it was punished by the bestowment game, turning into light and disappearing. And the reason why Galji calmed down was naturally because he realized the problem. Based on the indescribable truth that he saw about Wu Ming, how could the current Wu Ming not be able to kill Maxwell? Chapter 880. Moreover, as Vera had previously understood, Wu Ming was an existence that could even kill humans in the final trial. How could he not be able to deal with a mere 4-digit number of demon kings? I understand. Thank you, Sir Villo, for helping me get rid of Maxwell. Galji respectfully thanked Wu Ming. After all, Maxwell was someone sent by the higher-ups to monitor them, and Galji wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. Do you know the secret of Maxwell's immortality? Wu Ming suddenly asked Galji. Galji revealed an expression as if he already knew. Sir Villo, I know the power in Maxwell's body. It's the power of the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. So you do know, Wu Ming said as he waved his hand, and a small ball of light filled with a strange light appeared in Wu Ming's hand. The ball of light emitted a strange light that seemed to be constantly moving. This was the source of Maxwell's power that Galji had mentioned, the third perpetual motion mechanism from the future. Wu Ming didn't know much about science. When Wu Ming arrived at the 5th floor of Nazalik and his doppelganger handed the ball of light to Wu Ming, Wu-ming was still confused. The appraisal of the third perpetual motion mechanism was done by Collis. Collis had a large amount of information stored in her database, and with her processing system, as well as Collis' highest grade magic attire, as well as the influence of her origin power, Collis could easily do this. Moreover, Collis had also made the same judgment on the already dead Maxwell. Maxwell was a hypothetical humanoid demon or similar mechanism proposed by the British physicist James Clerk Maxwell that could detect and control the movement of a single molecule. Later generations called it a hypothetical spirit or demon. Maxwell was a demon born from a paradox that was denied from the beginning, so he naturally didn't have a physical body. As a hypothetical demon born from this paradox, his strength couldn't even withstand a slightly stronger physical attack. But because of the third perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell combined it with his own characteristics of not having a physical body to be able to produce himself infinitely and resurrect instantly after death. However, even with the perpetual motion mechanism, Maxwell couldn't resist the rules of the box. Maxwell was successfully killed by Wu-ming using the gift game, and the perpetual motion mechanism naturally became the dropped item that killed Maxwell. After all, this third perpetual motion mechanism wasn't Maxwell himself. According to Collis, the third perpetual motion mechanism was a byproduct of Maxwell. In that case, could Maxwell, who could freely control absolute evil's doppelganger, have something to do with absolute evil Azidakaha? However, after having this thought, Wu-ming immediately stopped thinking. In any case, those two fellows had already been killed. What was the point of pondering over this? After Maxwell died, he dropped this ball of light. Wu-ming wasn't afraid that Galgi would snatch it away, so he openly showed it to Galgi. "Congratulations, Sir Villo." Galgi smiled as if it was from the bottom of his heart, and this made Wu-ming feel quite awkward. "But I presume that you don't need this now that you've fully recovered, right?" Galgi's words had a hidden meaning. "You've already guessed it." Wu-ming wasn't surprised. Galgi's fully recovered referred to Wu-ming's recovery of his body. Galgi had seen Wu-ming before, or rather, he had seen Wu-ming wrapped in black mud. Although he didn't know where he had seen it, Galgi was completely certain that he had seen Wu-ming's body before. Moreover, Galgi's mind wasn't the same as 16 Nights. After calming down, he probably realized that Wu-ming, who killed absolute evil, had already retrieved Wu-ming's body. And if Galgi had really seen Wu-ming's body, he would naturally understand that Wu-ming didn't need the third perpetual motion mechanism that much. "You want it?" Wu-ming looked at Galgi with a playful expression and tossed the two balls of light in his hands. "To tell you the truth, we've already figured out Maxwell's nature. We originally planned to kill him after this incident." Galgi's words implied that the perpetual motion mechanism was something that they had long planned to use, but who knew that it would be intercepted by Wu-ming halfway. "So, you want to continue the deal with me?" However, Wu-ming was amused by his own words. "I'm afraid you haven't realized the situation you're in, Your Highness." Although all of Galgi's subordinates addressed Galgi as Your Highness, it was rather ironic for Wu-ming to say these two words. "Putting aside the fact that your another cosmology is useless against me, even if you have other trump cards, do you think they will work on me?" It wasn't that Wu-ming was arrogant, but his body had experienced countless years of accumulation in the box court world. Even though it was still underage, it was only a step away from adulthood. In Wu-ming's knowledge, an adult origin dragon and an underage origin dragon were two different species. If an underage origin dragon was considered a living creature, an adult origin dragon was no longer a living creature. As for what it was, Wu-ming would only know after he became an adult. All in all, even though Wu-ming wasn't an adult origin dragon, Wu-ming, who was only a step away from adulthood, was no longer the same as before. Wu-ming was so powerful that even Wu-ming, who had returned to his body, was taken aback. If Wu-ming's strength were to be classified according to the box court world strength, Wu-ming's strength would definitely be in the double digits. As for why it wasn't in the single digits, it was because, firstly, Wu-ming wasn't sure about the strength of the single digits. Secondly, Wu Ming's strength might have exceeded the single digits and reached an unmeasurable level. If it were an adult Wu Ming, there wouldn't be a need to worry because an adult origin dragon would definitely exceed the single digits. But it was also important to clarify that Wu Ming's hypostasis had only become an existence in the double digits. In other words, he had completely embodied the hypostasis that an origin dragon should have, unlike before, when any random person dared to provoke Wu Ming. Of course, Wu Ming had always subconsciously concealed his hypostasis, but Wu Ming didn't realize it. After all, whether it was the world that Wu Ming lived in or everyone in this world, their hypostasis was lower than Wu Ming's. If Wu Ming completely released his aura, anyone who sensed the aura of a higher hypostasis would die instantly. At that moment, Galji became extremely respectful. It was precisely because he had glimpsed Wu Ming's hypostasis when he activated the simulation of the another cosmology that he survived. But it was also because of this that Galji was completely convinced by Wu Ming. At the very least, Galji would never go against Wu Ming again in the future. He didn't even have any thoughts about it anymore. This came from the bottom of his heart, like a different kind of curse. Therefore, Galji wouldn't make any more deals with Wu Ming. Chapter 881. You're wrong, Lord Villo. What I meant was that you can use this on your subordinates. Galji smiled and shook his head. If it was the old Galji, he might have tried to make a deal with Wu Ming. However, after being affected by Wu Ming's hypostasis, he had no intention of taking advantage of Wu Ming or even making a deal with him. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have to ensure your subordinate's loyalty. However, Wu Ming looked at Galji strangely. What's wrong with this guy? Master, I'm afraid he saw your hypostasis and was affected by you. Kalas directly spoke to Wu Ming in Wu Ming's mind. Did he pry into my status? Wu Ming immediately thought of Pest. He didn't know what Pest had seen when he was summoned, but his attitude toward Wu Ming had completely changed. Unlike Galji's respect, Pest's attitude toward Wu Ming was one of extreme fear. Pest could see Wu Ming's true self because he had established a master-slave relationship with Wu Ming. However, how could Galji see his true self? My aura is indeed suppressed, isn't it, Kalas? Wu Ming asked Kalas. Since Wu Ming had just returned to his body, he might not have gotten used to it yet. Thus, Wu Ming had Kalas monitor his condition. Master, your aura has been subconsciously suppressed by you. It doesn't seem to have been released. Kalas had indeed been monitoring Wu Ming's condition, but Wu Ming had been subconsciously suppressing his aura all this time. Logically speaking, it shouldn't have leaked out. Could it be that the another cosmology simulation allowed Galji to see my hypostasis? Wu Ming thought about it. Perhaps only the another cosmology simulation could allow Galji to see his true self. Moreover, his current hypostasis wasn't something someone like Galji could withstand. The difference between the old Wu Ming and the current Wu Ming was like a balloon filled with slow air and a balloon filled with water. As long as the balloon didn't burst, the latter's fall from a high altitude was more lethal than the former's. If Galji had looked at him for a while longer, he might have really died. But now, Galji seems to be very respectful toward me. Wu Ming had an idea. Galji, what is it, Lord Villo? Galji looked at Wu Ming. Tell me everything about the person behind you. That's right. Wu Ming was trying to use Galji's current state to get information about the person behind Galji. But Galji shook his head. Lord Villo, I'm afraid that won't do. It seemed that even if Galji was very respectful, he wasn't at the point where he would listen to Wu Ming's every word. Master, he clearly respects you because of your strength. Everyone knows that respecting the strong is common knowledge in any world. Kalas complained in Wu Ming's mind. I know. I just want to try. Wu Ming replied to Kalas in his mind with some regret. However, Wu Ming had other ways to get Galji to reveal information. Let's make a deal, Galji. You tell me everything about the person behind you, and I'll deal with them. Wu Ming's words made Galji's eyes light up. After all, when Galji first learned of Wu Ming's existence, he wanted to make a deal with Wu Ming. He would provide the information, Wu Ming would help him deal with the enemy, and he would gain his freedom. Although they had fallen out before, Galgi, who was now affected by Wuming's status, was naturally shaken when he heard this deal. 210-5380 Outer Gate, No Name's base camp. At this moment, in No Name, Black Rabbit, Letitia, 16 Knights in Reverse, Jioyu Asuka, and Kasuga Hikari stood at the entrance of No Name, ready to go. Ren, Lily, and Pest stood at the entrance and watched the 5 of them leave. Black Rabbit, Letitia, when you reach the North District, you must take care of 16 Knights and the others. Ren reminded Black Rabbit worriedly. I'll try my best, young Master Ren. Black Rabbit looked at the 3 problem children who were full of fighting spirit and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead helplessly. Although Letitia was also helpless, she still comforted Ren. Don't worry, Ren. Master is still in the North District. When the time comes, there's no need to worry about not being able to control these 3. What a joke. When we reach the North District, I must teach that bastard Villo a lesson. There's a demon king, and he didn't call me. 16 Knights in Reverse was very excited. He looked like a wild horse that was about to explode. Same, seconded. Jioyu Asuka and Kasuga Hikari agreed in unison with 16 Knights in Reverse. The 2 of them were also people who wanted to see the world in chaos. Don't joke around, stupid adults. According to Lord White Yiksha, the Demon King this time is the absolute Demon King of one of the humans' final trials. That's one of the strongest in Hakata. If you continue to underestimate the enemy like this, Black Rabbit won't bring you along. Black Rabbit reprimanded from the side. These 3 problem children were too noisy. The enemy this time was clearly not easy to deal with. That's right, when White Yiksha went to the North District, he sent a letter to No Name. The content was that the seal of absolute evil had been broken. However, White Yiksha had been in the North District for a long time, and No Name had just reorganized their people and prepared to support the North District. It was completely because they could not make a decision. The main reason was that 16 Knights and the other 2 were too suitable for their identity as problem children. They clamored about fighting the Demon King. That was absolute evil, a Demon King with a 3-digit number. Even people with a 2-digit number did not dare to underestimate it. It was fundamentally different from the Demon King that 16 Knights and the other 2 had dealt with during their time in Hakata. If they let the problem children go, who knew what kind of trouble they would cause? They might even lose their lives. In the end, Black Rabbit and 16 Knights and the other 2 came to a compromise before they were ready to go. However, No Name was actually not too late. White Yiksha wrote a letter to tell No Name that it was only because Wuming was fighting against absolute evil in the North District. Most of the communities in the East District, more than 99% of them, did not even know that absolute evil had broken the seal in one of the humans' final trials. After all, when Glowing Flame Capital was attacked, many people did not know that absolute evil had broken the seal. Therefore, No Name was not too late. Seeing the 3 problem children obediently shut their mouths, Black Rabbit sighed again. Problem children were just too difficult to deal with. Right on the heels of that, Black Rabbit patted his face to encourage himself. Black Rabbit revealed a smile and raised an arm high. Then, everyone, let's go. It had to be said that Black Rabbit looked like he was going on a vacation. It looked like he had underestimated the enemy even more. The 3 problem children complained in their hearts. Right on the heels of that, the 3 problem children looked at each other and smiled tacitly. When they reached the North District, Black Rabbit would be completely useless. However, at this moment, a familiar voice entered everyone's ears. Where are you going? Chapter 882. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound and saw Wuming standing there, his face full of confusion. Wuming had just returned to No Name, where he saw the other members of No Name about to go on a long journey. How could he not be confused? Villo, mister. The members of No Name screamed as if they had seen a ghost. What's wrong? Everyone shouted in unison, causing Wu Ming to be stunned for a moment. What the hell happened? Mr. Villo, weren't you fighting against Absolute Devil King in the North District? Black Rabbit's ears twitched, looking confused. I killed the Devil King, and then I came back. Wu Ming's tone was very calm, as if he was saying, I came back after eating. But everyone had different reactions when they heard this. Ren and Black Rabbit were shocked. Restia was proud of Wu Ming. The three problem children were unhappy, and Pest was indifferent. After that, Wu Ming shrugged his shoulders and no longer cared about his companions, who he didn't know what they were doing. He walked straight into the interior of No Name. I'll go back first. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo. That was absolute devil. How could you kill him so casually? Black Rabbit turned around and wanted to chase after Wu Ming, but because he was too excited, his footsteps were a little shaky. I didn't kill absolute devil casually. I fought with him for a day and a night before I killed him. Wu Ming replied without turning his head. Although he said that, it still didn't seem like it was difficult for him to kill absolute Devil King. Furthermore, Reverse 16 Nights was very unhappy. Not bad, Mr. Villo. You actually took the big prize without anyone noticing. Reverse 16 Nights said as he suddenly jumped up and kicked at Wu Ming. Clatter. A golden chain suddenly emerged from silent cries closed like a cold spear. The sharp end of the chain was aimed at 16 Nights, who was trying to turn back. Realizing that the chain was not ordinary, 16 Nights did not choose to fight it head-on. Instead, he changed his movement in midair and kicked the chain directly. Bang! The deafening sound of steel colliding rang out, and the airwaves produced by the collision spread out, impacting everyone. This caused Black Rabbit and the others to subconsciously raise their hands to resist the airwaves. At the same time, Wu Ming's aura changed, and a tyrannical aura enveloped everyone present. However, the aura disappeared in an instant, and everyone felt as though they were hallucinating. In the next second, the originally rigid chain became like an extremely resilient steel whip, ruthlessly lashing towards 16 Knights who had yet to land on the ground. 16 Knights reacted instantly and kicked the golden chain. With the help of the reaction force of the golden chain, he jumped back into the air and did a 360-degree spin before landing steadily. Everyone looked at Wu Ming and 16 Knights in a daze. They could not tell whether the terrifying aura, just now, was an illusion or real. However, because the terrifying aura appeared for less than a tenth of a second, no one could tell whether it was real or an illusion. You've become stronger, Villo. Reverse 16 Knight's face was filled with an excited smile. He was excited that Wu Ming, a strong opponent, had become stronger. Just as you saw, I accidentally found my body, so my strength is naturally different from before. After comforting Enkidu, Wu Ming put the chain back into his sleeve and turned to look at everyone. So, Mr. Villo found his body? That's great, congratulations. Black Rabbit subconsciously felt happy that Wu Ming found his body. However, Black Rabbit immediately reacted. Wait, that's not the point. Don't fight in front of our community. Black Rabbit rushed towards Reverse 16 Knights in a frenzy, trying to subdue this problematic child who started the fight. Stop, Black Rabbit, I won't fight anymore. However, Reverse 16 Knights stopped Black Rabbit with words. Villo has become beyond my imagination. I can't beat him now. Reverse 16 Knights shook his head silently. Black Rabbit, who came to Reverse 16 Knights' side, made a strange sound. Reverse 16 Knights, this problematic child, actually admitted that he was not a match for Garen and stopped the fight. Did the sun rise from the west? The truth was not as exaggerated as Black Rabbit thought. It was just that Reverse 16 Knights was more aware of Wu Ming's strength than the others. When Enkidu helped Wu Ming block Reverse 16 Knights' attack, Wu Ming subconsciously wanted to fight back. However, he did not control it well and almost used his full strength. After all, Wu Ming and AZ Dakaha were fighting too intensely. During that one day and one night of fighting, although Wu Ming did not really use his full strength, every move he made was not casual either. It might not be strong for AZ Dakaha, but for the people in the middle and lower levels of the community, it was a very strong move. In short, Wu Ming was used to fighting seriously. When faced with Reverse 16 Knights' greeting kick, he almost became serious. However, even so, Reverse 16 Nights was still aware of the difference between the two of them. He was no match for Wooming now. Reverse 16 Nights was not someone who did not know when to back down. He still had some self-awareness. Moreover, this was just Reverse 16 Nights' greeting to Wooming. He did not have any intention of fighting Wooming properly. Even if he did, he would not fight in front of so many people in no name. Therefore, it was impossible for them to fight. Black Rabbit was worrying too much. When I become stronger, let's fight again. Reverse 16 Nights revealed an unruly expression and looked at Wooming with joy and anticipation. No, it's too troublesome. After Wooming finished speaking, he turned around and walked into No Name again. Reverse 16 Nights did not mind and followed Wooming into No Name. After all, if they really wanted to fight, it was not something that could be rejected just because one of them was unwilling. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo. You have to explain the matter of the absolute Demon King, Black Rabbit said, and immediately chased after Wooming. Let's go, everyone. It's time to go back, Letitia said, and walked back into No Name. In the end, our anticipation was in vain. Not good. Jiu Yuao and Haruai Hiroyuki looked at each other helplessly and followed Letitia for a while. Rin looked around. Other than himself, only Pest was left. However, before Rin could say anything, Pest snorted coldly and silently walked into No Name. Rin smiled awkwardly and walked into No Name unhurriedly. As the leader of the community, Rin successfully became the last member to enter his community. Chapter 883. In the No Name chat room, everyone sat together and chatted with Wooming. They learn about absolute evil bit by bit from Wooming. So that's how it is. Mr. Villo has experienced quite a lot of things along the way. Black Rabbit pointed at several things that Wooming said. Fighting with the undying Demon King, fighting with the heroes born in the apocalypse, and finally fighting with the humans in the final trial. I'm jealous. 16 Nights wished he could replace himself with Wooming to experience all that. 16 Nights was excited just by thinking about it. Who knew how happy Wooming, who had experienced all that, would be? But that's only for Villo. If it were us, our lives would be in danger. Jiuan Fei Niao held her teacup and took a sip gracefully. Letitia said, agreeing with Jiuan Fei Niao's words. Yes, Fei Niao is right. Other than Maxwell, whether it's Galgi with his another cosmology or absolute evil in the final trial, they're all very strong enemies for you. Even I would have a hard time winning against them. 16 Nights, on the other hand, didn't care. How would I know if I don't try? I have to see it with my own eyes before I comment. The more dangerous the enemy, the more he liked it. After all, they were problem children. I just didn't expect that Galgi would have another cosmology. It's really surprising. Rin was quite concerned about Galgi, who looked to be the same age as him. By the way, what's this another cosmology? Jiuan Fei Niao raised a question. All right, Miss Fei Niao, you guys have just arrived at the box court. I'm afraid you guys don't know about another cosmology. It seemed like Black Rabbit wanted to explain. To put it simply, it contains the powerful gift of cosmology. It can be infinitely magnified to interfere with the powerful forces of the outside world. Every another cosmology is unique, which means that every another cosmology has different abilities. Jiuan Fei Niao nodded thoughtfully. Simply put, it's an extremely powerful gift. You can think of it that way, Miss Flying Bird. However, another cosmology is much more precious and powerful than ordinary gifts. After all, Black Rabbit did not simulate the another cosmology and could not explain it in detail. It could only give Long Flying Bird a general understanding. Wooming interjected. It is said that the existence with the simulated cosmic atlas has the potential to become the center of a group of gods. Because of the power of the simulated cosmic atlas, I am afraid that only those with the simulated cosmic atlas can compete with it. Wooming recalled how Galgi had killed Wooming's doppelganger by forcibly activating the simulated another cosmology. It could be said that if it was not Wooming's doppelganger that was killed, but the spiritual base body, that blow would have also killed Wooming's spiritual base body. Therefore, in Silent's opinion, to fight against that kind of power, unless they also have the simulated cosmology, they can only fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Otherwise, only Silent, the bug, can fight against it without the simulated cosmology. Interesting, a simulation of an alien cosmology. 16 Nights Reversal smiled, but no one knew what he was thinking. However, Black Rabbit was frightened by 16 Nights Reversal's smile. 16 Nights, Sand, don't think too much. Black Rabbit has a feeling that you will do something. Black Rabbit said as he looked at Jiun Fei Niao and Haruai Buyao. Really, these problem children were too good at causing trouble. Black Rabbit had to be prepared for a rainy day. Then, Black Rabbit noticed that Haruai Buyao seemed to be thinking about something. Miss Buyao, what's troubling you? Although they were problem children, they were all companions. Black Rabbit was happy to help his companions solve their problems. I'm a bit concerned about the griffin Villo mentioned. Haruai Buyao hugged Sam Moucat and said the reason for his deep thoughts. Is it the genome tree on the griffin? Wuming guessed the reason for Haruai Buyao's concern. This was something that Wuming mentioned before. Yes, Haruai Buyao nodded. The genome tree was a gift from my father, and according to what Villo said, the genome tree on the griffin seems to be almost complete. In this way, Haruai Buyao had to guess whether the griffin was related to his father. That's easy. Just ask the griffin. Wuming said casually. Everyone was shocked. But, Villo-san, can you find the griffin? Black Rabbit was puzzled. Of course I can. Galji's group is still trapped in my inherent barrier. Wuming explained, and then looked at everyone innocently. Didn't I say that? You didn't say that. Everyone shouted at Wuming in unison. Villo, I really didn't know that you're actually a natural airhead. 16 Nights crossed her arms and looked at Wuming jokingly. Ahem, in short, Galji's group is locked up by me. I didn't have time to hand them over to White Yiksha. If you want to talk to the griffin, I can do it at any time. Everyone looked at Haruai Buyao. Finally, Haruai Buyao looked at Sam Moucat's arms and nodded. Nazalik's inherent barrier, 6th layer, forest. When Galji's group was locked up in Nazalik's inherent barrier by Wuming in the form of a gift competition, they were all separated. Galji was in the lava area of the 7th layer. Aurora was in the underground lake of the 4th layer, and the unconscious Ling was directly thrown into the wilderness of the 8th layer by Wuming. The seriously injured Glea was taken care of by Wuming and placed in the forest area of the 6th layer. And it turned out that the griffin could indeed settle down in the forest. Glea, who had woken up from his coma, was lying quietly on the ground at this moment to avoid physical exhaustion. Although it was very weak, Glea's injuries were indeed recovering. In short, it was better than nothing. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Glea muttered to himself. Glea, who had woken up from his serious injuries, saw the contract document in front of him at a glance and knew that he was trapped in a place that was not a forest. I'm afraid it's some kind of personal space. Grove thought. After all, there were many people who had such a space in the box court world. Basically, it was used to hold gift competitions. At this moment, he was obviously trapped in the gift competition, so Grove guessed that this was Wuming's personal space. I wonder how His Highness and the others are doing. Grove didn't know if His Highness and the others had escaped, or if they were captured like him. But right now, it was more important to recover from his injuries, so Glea simply laid down here peacefully. However, at this moment, there was a fluctuation in space, and two extremely obvious figures appeared not far away from Glea. Glea couldn't help but be vigilant. Chapter 884. Villo, Glea, whose eyesight was much better than humans, saw the two people walking towards them at a glance. The one in front was Wuming. Supporting his body that had not fully recovered but was almost able to fight, Glea stood up, and a fighting spirit emanated from him. Although Glea's wings had not recovered yet, he had enough time to rest, which allowed Glea to have the power to fight. What, Glea, do you still want to fight me? Wuming, who was walking in front, did not release his aura to intimidate Glea. Instead, he snapped his fingers lightly. In an instant, the ground where Glea was standing cracked slightly, and chains rushed out one after another, throwing all of them onto Glea's body and tightly entangling him. Glea, who did not react in time, instantly fell to the ground because his limbs were all tied up. Damn it! Glea raised his head and looked at Wuming rather unbearably. Galgi and the others are fine. I just locked them up. You should be honest, I don't want to do anything to you, but I will still hand you over to White Yiksha after this. Wuming walked in front of Glea and patted his griffin's head. Up to you. Glea could not beat Wuming anyway, and he was now a prisoner. So what could he do? I came to see you this time because I have a companion who is quite interested in you. You can talk to her. Wuming said, and Haruai Hibako walked past Wuming from behind and came to the front. Hello, Mr. Glea Grove. The quiet girl holding the three-furred cat took the lead to greet him. Hello, little girl. Grove responded to Wuming. Let's not talk about Wuming first. At least the little girl in front of him looked pretty good. I'll leave first, Grove. If you're done talking, knock on the chain, and I'll come and pick you up. Wuming had no intention of listening in, so he left after instructing Haruai Hibaku. Haruai Hiroyuki nodded, then looked at Grove again. My name is Haruai Hibu. Do you know this? Haruai Hibu said as he took out the pendant hidden in his clothes. Could this be? After leaving the 6th floor, Wuming arrived at the 7th floor, which was Galgi's floor. Sir Villa, what do you think? Galgi, who was sitting on a rock that was colder than other places, immediately stood up when he saw Wuming. Wuming helped Galgi find a rock that was not so hot. Galgi did not need to keep the another cosmology on to prevent the heat. After all, if he accidentally glanced at Wuming when the another cosmology was half turned on, it would definitely be uncomfortable. I haven't done anything to those people yet. It'll take some time, but I'll deal with them in a way that won't put the blame on you or me. After Galgi told Wuming everything he knew about the people behind him, Wuming did not immediately make a move on those existences. First of all, Galgi had never really come into contact with the higher-ups. The people he came into contact with were people who were not at the highest level. At most, they were at a higher level than Galgi. Even so, Wuming was very sure that some of the gods in the upper levels of the box court were behind this. However, because he did not know which gods were behind this, Wuming could only make a move on the people Galgi knew. After finding these people, Wuming would slowly dig out the people behind these people. However, these people's whereabouts were always unpredictable. Wuming could not find them at the moment, but Wuming had a way. After returning to the root, Wuming could use the root's authority to find people in the box court. By then, they would not be able to escape. Oh, what is it? Galgi was quite interested in the method Wuming had prepared. Not only could he deal with those people, but he could also do it without exposing his identity. However, Wuming had no reason to tell Galgi that it would be the same even if Galgi's attitude toward him became slightly more respectful. You don't need to know that. Then, Wuming snapped his fingers. A golden chain extended from Wuming's sleeve and bound Galgi. It was a celestial lock. The celestial lock was infinitely long. It could still be used after binding Galgi. Although Galgi did not recognize the chain's true identity, he knew it was a divine spark weapon. Lord Villo. Galgi did not resist, but he was a little puzzled by Wuming's actions. He was trapped in Wuming's game of gifts and could not break free. There was no need to use a divine spark weapon to tie him up. I'm going to hand you over to White Yiksha, so I need to do this. As Wuming spoke, he reached out and pierced Galgi's body. He did not want to kill Galgi. When Wuming stabbed Galgi, a ripple appeared in front of him. Wuming only reached his hand in. Wuming found what he wanted without much searching. Then, Wuming fished out a slightly curled piece of parchment appeared in Wuming's hand. It was a contract scroll that Wuming used to force Galgi into a gift match. Game name of gift. Accumulated time contestants. Galgi, Aurora. Ringtone, Glea, Grove contestant victory condition 1. Stay in the designated venue. Unlimited. Contestant victory condition 2. Defeat the organizer contestant defeat condition. Leave the designated venue contestant defeat punishment. Repeat the game organizer victory condition. Defeat the contestant organizer defeat condition. The contestant wins oath. Respect the above content, based on the glory, flag, and organizers. Authority, host the gift game. Originate God seal. That's right, it was such an unsolvable contract document. Not to mention the victory condition. The failure condition was obviously problematic. This obviously did not allow Galgi to leave here, even if he had a way to leave, because the failure penalty was to repeat the game. In other words, if Galgi and the others used their own way to leave the designated venue, which was Wuming's inherent enchantment, then they would fail, and the failure penalty would make them return here again. The only way was to defeat the organizer. However, after Wuming locked them here, he did not care about them anymore. Wuming only met Galgi twice, and Wuming did not even see the others, let alone defeat them. And this was not against the rules. After all, there was no rule that the organizer could not leave the designated venue. So this unsolvable gift game essentially became a gift game that restricted the movements of Galgi and the others. And now, Wuming wanted to destroy this gift game. Kaka! Wuming condensed a power that Galgi did not recognize in his hand, and the soft parchment made the sound of a hard object shattering. Wuming was using the source power to destroy the gift game. As long as the gift game was destroyed, Galgi and the others could be freed from the shackles of the gift game. As for why he did not pause it, after all, deleting and pausing were two different things. After Wuming handed Galgi over to White Yiksha, he did not want to care about them anymore. So Wuming chose to destroy this gift game directly. Crack! With Wuming's continuous force, the entire parchment shattered. Chapter 885. Snap! Wuming snapped his fingers, and two figures instantly appeared beside Galgi. It was Aurora and Belle. Your Highness! Although Ling was unconscious when he caught her, it had been a long time since then, and she had already woken up. You paused our game of grace? Aurora stood vaguely in front of Galgi and looked at Wuming with vigilance. Servillo didn't pause the game. He directly destroyed the forced game of grace. Galgi answered on behalf of Wuming. Although Aurora and Belle were shocked that Wuming could destroy the game of grace, they were more shocked by Galgi's attitude toward Wuming. Your Highness! Aurora and Belle were puzzled by Galgi's attitude. Why was he so respectful? Belle, Aurora, you must correct your attitude as a prisoner. Galgi looked at the two of them and gestured for them to not act rashly. I made a deal with your Highness. I will help him deal with the enemy, and he will willingly be handed over to White Yiksha to be imprisoned. Waving the heaven lock in his hand, Wuming explained to the two of them. Although Aurora and Belle were a little surprised, it was not impossible to accept after thinking about it carefully. After all, if it was a deal of this level, His Highness would still be able to accept it. However, Wuming and Galgi's deal wasn't like this. However, Wuming wouldn't let Galgi off, and Galgi was aware of this, so he didn't expose Wuming's words. Besides, Galgi didn't know if it was due to Wuming's influence, but he thought through a lot while meditating on the 7th floor. How could dragging out an ignoble existence compare to living honorably? Galgi indeed had to pay the price for his previous actions. If not, wouldn't those who died indirectly because of him be wronged? He was a hero who appeared in the post-apocalyptic world, so he had to do something worthy of the name Galgi. And most importantly, Wuming would help him deal with the enemy. Therefore, even though he was about to be imprisoned, Galgi felt that he had gained freedom. Freedom from being dominated by others. Servillo is right. We're about to go to jail. I'm sorry for dragging you into this. Galgi looked at the two of them apologetically. What are you talking about, Your Highness? Since you want to go to jail, we will definitely accompany you. Grabbing the trapped Galgi, Ring shook her head. Aurora had the same idea. There was no need for apologies between them. The reason they had gathered together was because of Galgi. Since Galgi was going to jail, they would accompany him. Wuming was very clear about this, so he only bound Galgi. After all, as long as Galgi was still there, the others wouldn't leave him. It was precisely because he knew this that Galgi said, "Sorry for implicating you," instead of "You can leave." Of course, even if they wanted to leave, Wuming might not allow it. No, Wuming definitely wouldn't allow them to leave. Although Galji was the mastermind, Aurora and Ring's sins weren't small either, so they had to be punished. So, where's Glea? Aurora looked at Wuming again. She and Ring had been summoned to Galji's side by Wuming using teleportation, but why wasn't Glea there? One had to know that Glea was seriously injured in order to block Wuming's weapon salvo. Could it be? Aurora and Ring suddenly felt sad. Both of them were guessing if Glea had died from his serious injuries. However, only Galji looked indifferent because he knew very well that Glea must be fine. Wuming wouldn't attack Glea, and without external influence, a griffin's vitality was very tenacious. It wouldn't die so easily. Don't worry, it's just because a companion in my community is looking for Glea for something. It's just that the discussion hasn't ended yet. Just wait a little. This made Aurora and Ring feel helpless. In this day and age, they still had to wait when they were sent to prison, but at this moment, the celestial lock binding Galji made a clanging sound. According to Wuming's request, as long as Herubu Yao and Glea finished their discussion, they could knock on the heaven lock that bound Glea and send a message to Wuming, asking him to pick her up. Although the interval was very short, there was no doubt that Herubu Yao had finished talking to Glea. My companion has finished talking to Glea. Wuming snapped his fingers again. In an instant, the surrounding scene suddenly changed, and everyone came to a forest. Your Highness! Glea's surprised voice entered everyone's ears. Glea and Galji were also bound by golden chains, and there was a girl beside them. The girl was Herubu Yao. Elder Glea, are your injuries okay? Ring immediately ran to Glea's side, looking rather worried. Then, Aurora and Galji followed. After all, Glea was indeed seriously injured at that time. Except for the wings that have not recovered yet, the injuries on my body have mostly recovered. Glea was right. At that time, he had his back facing Wuming's attack. Therefore, as a griffin, his wings had suffered the most serious injuries. It's good that you're fine. At this moment, Galji was also relieved. While Galji and the others were talking, Wuming also talked to Herubu Yao at this moment. How is it? Did you get anything you want to know? Herubu Yao thought for a moment and nodded, but then shook his head. This made Wuming a little dumbfounded. Are you not satisfied with the answer? Wuming guessed. Yes. This time, Herubu Yao nodded honestly. However, I'm already very satisfied to be able to talk to Glea. Herubu Yao showed a satisfied smile. It seemed that he had made friends with Glea. Wuming, on the other hand, felt that Haruai Hiroyuki was quite content. After all, not everyone has the opportunity to find clues when looking for something they want. Although Wuming didn't know what Herubu Yao was looking for, Herubu Yao should be satisfied to be able to find a clue. Do you need my help? Whatever Herubu Yao was looking for, Wuming would find it in an instant when he returned to the route. However, Herubu Yao refused. I can do it myself. Then, Herubu Yao's face showed a trace of unwillingness to admit defeat, as expected of a problem child. At this moment, Wuming could only smile helplessly. But it was also true that if it was something important to Herubu Yao, then it was better to let Herubu Yao do it alone. Then, Wuming looked at Galji and the others who were still chatting. It's almost time to go. It was time to go to jail. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.